the door, see if we're ready. All right, we're ready.
Yes, we're ready.
All right. Let me know when you're on.
We are on and rolling.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Currier. I live here in Nashua at 6 New Searles Road. I serve you as the chair of this zoning board. We're all volunteers up here. If I could ask somebody to kindly just shut that door, just pull the little stopper. So first, before we get going on tonight's cases, if anybody doesn't have an agenda for tonight, the agendas are on that brown table to your left, to my right. It's under that big screen TV. Feel free to grab one, and you can see where your case is. We have 7 on our agenda tonight, and we'll be following the order of the agenda. So before we get going, I'd like to go over a few rules. First, as a public meeting, this meeting is recorded on 3 venues. It's recorded first on TV, so the cameras are rolling. It'll be rebroadcast on Channel 16 sometime in the next few days. There's also an audio recording, and in a few days it'll be available on the Go Nashua website, where you can click the zoning board and listen to the meeting. And then the actual legal transcript is a written transcript of minutes that will be transcribed within a few days, and we usually review it and approve it at the following meeting. So because we record the meeting as such, I ask that there's only one person to speak at a time, and who's ever speaking is to speak into the microphone. If it's not spoken in the microphone, it doesn't get picked up, and if it didn't get heard, it didn't get recorded, it didn't happen. And we want to hear everything you want to say tonight, and so we hope you can hear everything we can say, and if you're not hearing us, raise your hand and we can crank up the volume. So because we're being recorded like that, it's a little bit of a slower conversation. It's not so much like sitting around a coffee table, because really only one person is going to be at the mic speaking at a time. So if you could please indulge with that, and I ask that if you're not speaking in the mic, to try to keep the volume down, and if you have a cell phone, I ask you to please silence it now. If your case isn't being heard and you want to talk, you could feel free to go out in the hallway and talk as much as you want, but while in here, I ask for quiet. So to my right is Mary Ellen McKay. She serves as our clerk. Going around is J.P. Boucher, a full-time member. He's the vice chair. And we also have alternate member Kathy Vitale. And to my left is Mr. Carter Falk, and he is the deputy planning manager. I had to look at my notes and make sure I get his title right here at City Hall. So first, variances. We're here tonight because there's 7 folks asking for variances. And just to clarify, a variance is a request to deviate from this thick book of Nashua codes. In fact, every town in New Hampshire has zoning codes. And there's often a lot of dispute with zoning codes, and to relieve the court system, this is the first safety valve, you might say, where local zoning boards by folks, lay people such as us who live here, to adjudicate on the case or the request that you may have to deviate from this code. By state law, there's requirements that this board needs to have in order to grant a variance, and I will get those right here. There's 5 criteria which this board needs to hear, and I'll briefly tick through the 5 criteria. First, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Number 2 is the spirit of the ordinance is observed. Number 3, substantial justice is done. Number 4, the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. And number 5, that literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. So that's the 5 criteria that this board needs to determine in order to grant a variance. And to grant a variance, it requires 3 or more affirmative votes. 3 or more affirmative votes from the 4 of us sitting here this evening. The order that we receive testimony, each case, there's actually 2 components to it. The first component is the public hearing, and the public hearing is where everyone hears from you, and the public hearing occurs where folks in the audience or people who have sent us letters, there is one letter we have tonight, will be read into the record. Likely during the public hearing that this board will ask questions to the people testifying. After the public hearing is concluded, there'll be a public meeting right away. The public meeting is where the four of us deliberate on the case and likely come to a conclusion. So public hearing, then public meeting. The way the public hearing works by our bylaws is the applicant has up to 15 minutes to present their case. There's actually a clock here that'll tick down. The light will be green for the first 14 minutes, then yellow from minute 14 to 15, and then go red at minute 15. Applicants don't need to take that long if they wish. Sometimes cases are complex. 15 minutes is a short time to get everything in, and other times cases are simple and not all that time is needed. But at any rate, the applicant has up to 15 minutes to present their case. After the applicant has presented their case, anybody else in favor has up to 5 minutes to present their case. Then anybody with opposition or questions or concerns will have up to 5 minutes at the microphone to present their case. So first we'll hear of everybody in support, and then we'll hear from anyone in opposition. If there is opposition, the applicant then has 5 minutes back at the microphone to address that opposition. And then the last bit of testimony, if there has been someone who has spoken in opposition, that person will have the final 5 minutes to present their case. If there's multiple people who've spoken in opposition, one and only one person will be able to speak in opposition. So that is the order of the public hearing, and then the public hearing will close, a public meeting will begin, and we'll likely to deliberate on the case. A few other notes. If we render a decision and somebody feels aggrieved that it's a wrong decision, the first step is to request a rehearing. The rehearing needs to be submitted within 30 days to Mr. Falk. We may or may not, if we get a rehearing request, we always act on those within 30 days. But a very important point, if there's a rehearing request that this board then decides to rehear, the case is actually stayed. In other words, suppose we made an approval of something and somebody said, no, we got it wrong, that should have been denied, and has a rehearing request, and we agree with the rehearing request, and that happens once in a while, then that approval would be stayed until we rehear the case again. So I hope that's not too confusing, but I'll remind folks as we go along about that. Are there any questions from the board? Are we ready to get going? Does anyone in the audience have any questions about this meeting? If not, I guess we'll get going with case number one. Case number one, the owner is Austin Gooden. The address is 11 Hampton Drive. Hello. You could come to the microphone if you'd like, or please do, I should say. And the request is a variance to encroach up to 28 feet into the 40-foot required rear yard setback to replace an existing 10 by 16 deck with a 20 by 40 deck. And if I could indulge you to just give us your name and address, I'm going to guess it's Austin Goodman, but just for the record, if you could give us that, and take us take it away with your application.
Okay, my name is Austin Gooden, 11 Hampton Drive, Nashua, 03063. I was told that I had to have a variance because I was going to be 4 feet, more than 4 feet off the ground. So when I saw this 28-foot encroachment, I was kind of surprised, but be as it may. I currently have a 10 by 16 deck, and I would like to enlarge the deck to a 20 by 40. I'd like to go larger, but your rule says it's got to be width times length and can't be greater than 2 or something like that. But at any rate, I don't see where this is going to affect anybody in the neighborhood. I have an excavator coming in who's going to put the proper piers in the ground in the proper places. The primary purpose is give us a little bit more entertaining area when we have family and friends over. And the length was originally going to be 35, but I increased that to 40 because I found out fairly recently that I've got arthritis in the spine, and one of these days I may need a chairlift. And so that's why I went for the extra 5 feet. The VA would support me with a ramp, but that would end up having to go back and forth several times because their rules on pitch limits, what they can do in platforms and stuff like that. So that would end up being I guess, more of a nuisance. Okay. That's it.
All right, well, thank you for that testimony. I guess I'll just start with a clarification. I think the only reason you're here, we might say, is because every property has like a front, side, and rear yard setback, and in your area, actually, I'd never been on Hampton Drive before.
Well,
I
that's-
took a look at your place. It's a nice part of town. I've been up Coburn Ave many times. But anyway, it's just the fact that with the R18 zone or the half-acre zone, there's a 40-foot rear yard setback, and your proposed deck goes 28 feet into that.
Well, do you have a copy of my plan up there?
Yeah, I think we all have copies of it.
Okay. If you go to, I guess towards the back of the package, on the last page, it should show you the way my house is sitting on it. As you see, that based upon an R18, I'm supposed to have 20 feet on either side of the house. On one side of the house, I do not. The house was built with only 16 feet there. The other side, I've got greater than 20 feet. In the front, we got the 10-foot easement from the road, and then a 20-foot from that to the front of the house. Well, my house is actually probably about another 10 feet behind that. So anything I want to do to the back of my house requires an easement.
Well, that's a good argument for a hardship, and that's why we're here. In other words, just to paraphrase a little, you're making an argument that the situation of your house on your lot, which is to the rear, is a hardship because many people, I think, would like to have a deck on the back, and in your case, it pushes it into the rear yard setback. So, point taken.
I mean, this isn't just mine. It's the whole neighborhood is this way.
Yep.
If I remember correctly, an R18 is supposed to have like 200 feet frontage. Well, there's no property in our neighborhood that has
Yeah,
that.
it's not that big. We'll get that. But while Carter's looking up that, are any questions, Mr. Boucher?
Sure, so just tell us, obviously, you have a unique situation, so just tell us what's the property that's behind your house that actually separates your house from your neighbor in the back? You have a unique situation where you have common property right behind your
Yes.
house, right? And then you have a neighbor behind that, right? So I guess what I just want to hear from you is that, that there is an existing swath of land that you don't have anybody living on, right?
Correct.
Right.
Right.
Which is
The-
unique.
The common land directly behind my house is heavily forested, and so in the wintertime, when all the foliage is down, you can see lights from the other side, and that's about it. And I have two neighbors that are here that are on the one side of my property, the corner lot and the next one.
All right, so I just wanted to get into testimony that you have this unique situation where you have common land behind you,
Yes.
and that there is a significant distance to your neighbor in the back.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Vitale has a question for you.
I see as part of your application that when you build the deck, it's going to be a little bit off the ground.
Yes.
And is that the shed in the back left corner of the property? Is that the shed you're referring to that you're going to remove?
Yes.
Okay. So because that looks right on the property line for the most part.
Yes. We're doing a little bit of excavation that underneath the deck, I'll have sufficient area that I can put all the stuff that I've got in my shed underneath there.
Okay.
And that way the shed goes away.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I think we're all set. You could have a seat, Mr. Gooden, and is there anybody else to speak in favor of the proposed deck at 11 Hampton Drive? Anybody else in favor? Anybody with questions or concerns opposed to the deck? Hi, ma'am, if you'd like to come to the microphone and give us your name and address.
Hi, I'm Heather Gass of 8 Frost Drive, Nashua, New Hampshire. I am a neighbor to Mr. Gooden on one side of his house, and I do have a few questions and concerns with the proposed deck. My first kind of question and concern would be how the deck extends from the side of the property, and that side would be kind of alongside of where we live.
Yeah, actually, Mr. Boucher is, oh, you have that?
I have this here.
Okay.
Yep. So my concern here is it shows a 20-foot area next to the setback line, and the side of Mr. Gooden's deck here does fit within that setback line according to the illustration. But on the previous page, sorry, maybe this page here, it shows an extension of 9 feet out, which would total, which would come over that setback line by about 4 feet.
Over the 20-foot setback line.
Correct.
Actually, Mr. Falk,
It's all within the setback. There's the setback line.
yeah.
The deck is over here.
I think what you're, might be seeing is on this here, this one where we see it like going to the left,
Yes.
9 feet.
Yep.
That's the case, but the house is angled on the lot and further to the right from you.
Okay. Okay.
So the other diagram, this one here, which you have,
Okay.
you know, is accurately showing that it's all more than 20 feet away.
Okay.
Just to clarify, I mean,
That
I
makes
can
sense.
see how that confusion came up with the other picture.
Sure. Sure.
But the plan is, you know, well more than 20 feet away from,
It is, okay, that was my main concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just be concerned that the deck is a little bit large for what the other styles of decks that are in the neighborhood, and might look a little out of place and might be kind of coming close to our property line. And we also have a small backyard, and as Mr. Gooden mentioned, our houses are set back from the road, so we really have minimal space in our backyard, and I'd just be concerned that that the deck going so far out would become an issue, a little bit of an issue of privacy for where our property is located.
okay. Any questions for Ms. Gast? Is that G-A-S-T?
GASS.
G-A-S-S, Gast. Oh, okay. Any questions? I guess I guess I don't have any questions. I'm all set. Well, oh wait, we do. Ms. Vitale?
Have you spoken to Mr. Gooden directly about is it, you know, a deck addition or replacement there?
I have not. My husband had a few words just to see kind of the positioning of it, and we both reviewed the proposal today. And
I was just wondering if you talked about if there was any landscaping or anything like that going in
No,
next
we
to
have
that?
not.
Okay.
I guess it's not really a question. It's just more of a feedback, and that is from sight walking your street. At least from the street, I felt you're not going to see anything, but I appreciate your testimony that, you know, you feel there might be an incursion of privacy in the backyard. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Gass. All right. Is there anybody else with questions or concerns about? There's another. Hi, if you'd like to come to the mic and let us know what's on your mind.
Yeah, my name is Jim Seitz. I live
Hi.
at 6 Frost Drive, Nashua, New Hampshire.
Hi, good evening. So, okay, 6, I see where you're around the corner.
Right.
Kind of like touching on the backyard.
Yes. So I have a number of concerns. First of all, where did these plans come from, and are they accurate to the property lines? So, and when I look at some of these dimensions, they seem to be inaccurate. I
Well,
haven't
let me-
actually gone out with a tape measure and measured them, but they seem like they're not quite right.
Let me just try to,
Be you addressing us and then,
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess one other thing, one of the format, which I didn't specifically say, is when there's questions and testimony, if the procedure is to address the board with your questions, which you're doing, and
Yes.
then, the other folks will address us also with the answers. or
Okay.
we hope with the answers, which you're doing just fine. So
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying. Actually, I'm just, with your question, I'm just gonna ask Mr. Falk, is there,
Could I only have 2.5 minutes. Can
Oh,
I ask
you have more?
all-
Okay,
Can I
go
ask
ahead.
all my
yep,
questions?
go ask, yeah, fire
Okay.
away.
So, the survey, that's the first thing. I see the schematic in the package here. It looks thorough. I'm most concerned about further encroachment on the common land. So we have that big open area that we were discussing earlier behind the houses, and that's land that's common for the entire neighborhood, and it's supposed to be left undeveloped. I'm concerned that this deck will encroach so far into that area, maybe not over the line, but it's going to present a temptation to further develop that common land into an area that's going to be perceived as part of Mr. Gooden's property. So
Okay.
currently, we have a large section of that that's been developed with a lawn and a rock wall and landscape lights and bushes, irrigation system. These are encroachments on the common land. So
Okay.
if we get right up close to this, and it looks nice, it's not a eyesore the way it is, it looks very nice. I'm just afraid that with the diminishing area of his backyard, that he's going to desire to move further into that land. And then that common land that used to be woods in my backyard is going to be his backyard.
I see.
So, that's my major concern. The other concern is, have we looked into irrigation to make sure that there won't be any runoff from this property? I noticed that there's going to be a change in elevation, there's going to be some grading. Will that water run down to my property and cause flooding? And those are the questions that I have.
Okay. While you're there, are there any questions for Mr. Seitz?
no, not right now.
Okay. I guess I have a question for Mr. Falk while you're there, and that is, do you have any comment on the accuracy of the measurements or the plot plan? Is there a certified plot plan on record for this property?
Well, we don't require a certified survey for somebody building a deck. There is a plan that shows that it was done by a surveyor, and he drew the deck in the back there. Any application that we get, it's up to the property owner to ensure that it is accurate and true. We don't go out and measure it with a tape measure. We're not surveyors. The only one that can do that is a surveyor. We're not surveyors in our staff. So what he submitted, we have to assume that it's true and correct, and, we look at it from our, we have databases of maps and drawings and, here in the office, that we kind of just do a check and make sure about the setbacks and distances, so, I mean, that's all we really do, like, especially for like a deck or something like this. If it was a house or a building or something that had, occupancy in it, it would be a different story. Then they would need to get it surveyed.
So I guess I have another thought, like the common, I have a question for you, I should say. The common land that's behind your house, is that common land that's deeded or easemented to who? I mean, who enjoys that?
When the neighborhood was developed, they had an association. And the plan for that common land back in, I think it was the 70s, I'm not positive, was to maybe build a pool back there, a playground for the neighborhood to have access to. So this land is land that everybody in the neighborhood is paying taxes on. So it's supposed to be left undisturbed. So I'm concerned that if we This isn't free property. This is property that's, did
Well,
I
I
answer your
guess-
question? I kind of lost my.
Yeah,
my
no,
train of
no
thought.
problem. I guess the reason I was asking about the common land is because I didn't know who enjoys the benefit of the common land, but I think you answered it by saying all of the folks who surround it use it. And I guess the question that then comes to my mind is, what's the purpose of it? Could it be deeded for a pool? Could it be deeded for playground? Could it be deeded for, you know, each and every homeowner to kind of do with it what they want? Or could it be deeded to be left in a natural state? If I was just gonna wing a guess, clear out of the air, I'd say it's just deeded land to not be disturbed. But what do I know? And, but
believe-
I'm wondering if you know, but it sounds like,
I believe there is information that, on record in City Hall that will tell you exactly what that common land is for. And it is supposed to be left undisturbed.
so let's just make the assumption that it's undisturbed common land. I mean, just a couple of thoughts, like the proposed deck, which is 28 feet in, so typically, this neighborhood, it should have 40 feet of no structures, such as a deck, to the rear yard setback. This request is to encroach, so it would be 28 feet to the rear yard setback, just to clarify that. So, in my mind, it doesn't give any permission in any way to go further, or for the applicant to go further, like, hey, I've got a deck so I can extend my yard anymore. In other words, that common land stays put just the way it is. On this plot here at 11 Hampton Drive, there's a request for a deck to go 28 feet into that 40-foot side
Yes.
yard setback, just to clarify that. And I guess I just want to speak to the irrigation and runoff. I guess I'll have to ask the applicant that, because I don't have an answer to it. So we'll get an answer on that and see. So, yeah, Ms. McKay has a question?
Mr. Sykes,
Yes.
were you thinking that the deck would go onto the common land? Because from the way I understand this, between his property line and his home, he needs 40 feet. He can't go any further than that. He needs that space, but he wants to, in other words, to leave it open on his land. But he's encroaching 28 within the 40, so that's still gonna be open. It's not gonna touch the common land. It's just gonna be a shorter distance on his property.
Yes, I agree. That's the way I understand it.
Okay.
My concern is that there will be temptation to increase that 16-foot buffer or 12-foot buffer. So 12 feet is not a lot. It's a pretty short space. And maybe a tree will have to come down or something like that, because now the trees are too close to this new structure. So I'm using the word temptation. I'm not saying that there's any plan to do that. It's just a concern.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, point taken, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Seitz? No? All right, yeah, can I have a seat? Is there anybody else with questions or concerns about 11 Hampton Drive? No other questions or concerns? Mr. Gooden, could I indulge you to come back to the microphone, and we have a couple questions, and just, I guess what we have in front of us, this package here, I mean, to your knowledge, this is perfectly accurate?
I would say close to the foot.
Close to the foot, okay.
I took the plot plan originally, and I used I scanned it in, and then I used the plot plan as the formation of that. And then I went and I got the R18 zoning requirements, and I laid them down, got the 10-foot setback from the road, started from there, then went back to the 20 feet, where I set let's call it the house rectangle, and set that there, and then Then from that back was the 40 feet, and then I placed the house in there as, you know, as it was. And I did measure it off with the tape measure.
Okay. The other question posed about irrigation or runoff, were you going to be, I guess my expectation was there was going to be no regrading of the land, you were just building a deck on top of it, but could you clarify, is there any regrading of the land?
They'll be regrading right at my house, okay, underneath the deck. Because right now, from the front of the house, it has about a 15-inch rise going back, and then when you come around the corner, it has about another, I guess, up to 30-inch rise up to the point that I want to level that out. But that will be used to, I've got some low spots in the yard that are going to get filled up. Excuse me. But it's not going to go beyond the deck. It's just going to be underneath the deck.
Mhm.
That was the reason originally when it was for the greater than 4-foot height of the deck.
Okay.
Okay. If I could address,
If you could
If-
address this board, please, if you could address us with your comments.
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
As far as the privacy goes, I'm willing to put up some type of privacy block or something along that line, you know, similar to what Jim has on his deck. It's a lattice, you know, that sits up that, you know, it's not fully blocking, but still, you know, it does provide, I guess, some sense of privacy. The common land. When the neighborhood was set up, that further down on Hampton Drive, that there are 2 lots that were set aside for not building on. And those lots were supposed to be for like a clubhouse, pool, or something along that line. But I was told at the time that nobody really wanted to come up with the money to put in a pool, you know, that costs money, the upkeep and everything else. So those 2 lots remain unimproved, which is kind of interesting because now it's who takes care of that? You know, when the grass gets long and, you know, who mows it? You know, the people who live on either side of it? Well, I think that's pretty much who takes care of that area right there. The area that we have common land separates us from Coburn Avenue, the houses on Coburn Avenue. It separates us from was it Chapel Hill, Parish Hill? One of the hills, okay. It separates us from there, and it goes around, and what part of the area abuts Hollis? And so all that is unimproved. I mean, it's not used for anything. I've never heard. Now, the area that Jim is talking about, that I've put a rock wall around, is that I had an arborist come out and take a look at some pine trees because we had some pretty large pines come down in the neighborhood several years ago. And he went out there and he suggested I take down this pine, and I did. And so we took the pines down.
I'm just going to
And-
say, your 5 minutes is up, but
Okay.
you know, you have some testimony here, and I'm inclined to just go to the board and see if you're okay with having
Okay.
him
Well-
continue the testimony.
Okay, I
Okay, so
just want to
keep-
say
keep-
the irrigation,
Yeah.
it's 2 soaker hoses that aren't hooked up to anything. In fact, I've just been too lazy to take the things up because they didn't work.
Okay. So, in your understanding, that common land behind your house is just to be left in the natural state?
Yes,
And, you know, there's a concern, I think it's a valid concern, that if a deck is brought further close to that there'll be a temptation to then encroach into the common land. But I'd just like to hear from you if you're, have any intention.
I have
or-
no plans on doing that.
Uh-huh.
At one time, I was considering, we have a new dog, a new puppy, and I was considering putting up a fence that was made out of half-inch pipe, black, blend in with everything. But I've decided that's not going to happen. I am going to put up the fence, but the fence will be, on my property line.
Okay. A question by Ms. McKay?
One of the concerns was the irrigation. You said you're going to excavate underneath because what you're going to do is transfer items from the shed to underneath your deck. Are
Correct.
you considering putting a concrete slab under
No.
there? So there's going to be nothing on the ground?
I got 3 people that I need to select from, and my plan is to put rock.
Okay,
Is that, to level it out, go about 2 inches below the top of the foundation, fill that in with rock, and then when I put the deck up, I do plan on enclosing the sides to make it more secure, but I don't intend to put a slab or anything underneath that.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I guess I have one. Your proposed construction of the deck floor, like decks I'm familiar with are like 1x6s, and then there's like a gap between them. Is that the type of construction you're considering? And I'm wondering, like, say, when it's raining,
Yes.
does the rain go just between the boards?
I plan on using 16-inch centers on my joists.
Uh-huh.
And at Home Depot, they have these heavy plastic pieces that they use in the attic. So when you put insulation in the attic, it keeps a space, an air space, so the air can go up. Well, I plan to put those underneath the deck boards. And with the slight angle that the water will run off.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I think we're all set. You could please have a seat.
Thank you.
All right. And one of the folks, Ms. Gaz or Mr. Seitz, would you like to come back? You have other questions or concerns to speak to this case? You're welcome to. One of you two are. Well, we do want to stick to the laws where only one can come, so if you want to compare notes a little and have one person act as a proxy, that's fine too. So if you want to take a minute and do that, yeah, go ahead.
It should address only what he spoke to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, come on up, and again, what this little testimony we're looking for is to address what Mr. Seitz has, you're Mr. Seitz, Mr. Gooden has just responded to, but go
Yes.
ahead, so take it away.
Okay, I'm Jim Seitz again. The concern, my neighbor's concern was in regard to resale value and how this deck might affect resale value of their home and potentially my home. And then comments that I had, the plastic that Mr. Gooden was talking about sounds like it might actually divert water down the hill. And my house and my neighbor's house is prone to flooding in the springtime. If we get a lot of water, we get flooded. So it's a major concern for us, especially if there's going to be a diversion of water using the plastic that Mr. Gooden described, rather than having to just fall through the cracks like you were describing. I like the idea of the crushed stone that's going to maybe help to absorb it or divert it or keep it from running right down the hill. But that is a major concern. And then finally, it sounds to me like Mr. Gooden is not going to do any further encroachment on the common land. And I think that that would be that would go a long way toward getting an affirmative response. The other thing is I'm still skeptical. I'm not accusational, but skeptical about the drawings. I know that if I was to go out and prepare these drawings, I probably would make a mistake. And it might be in my favor or it might not be in my favor, but I'm not an architect, I'm not a surveyor, I'm not a land surveyor. I don't even know where the markers are on these properties. They're obscure, so it's hard for me to find where the corners are. So I think that there could potentially be some errors that this deck might cause a bigger encroachment than what what we've been discussing tonight.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Seitz? I guess there was Mr. Gooden was speaking about like a lattice sort of thing to, provide,
Yes.
I don't know what you call it, so privacy. Is that, do you have that on your deck, right? I mean, is there value of that?
My privacy, the lattice screen doesn't actually face the Gooden's residence. It faces the Gass's residence.
I see.
The deck that was on the house when I bought it, so it's been like that for 26 years,
I see.
so.
Do you find value in that, because he mentioned about doing that, or is that?
I don't really see much of the corner where this extension is going to be coming out.
Mhm.
I have a couple of big trees in my yard that kind of block it out. But with this new deck, I will see quite a bit because it's going to be 20 feet instead of 10 feet off the back of his house. Plus, it's going to be 9 feet hanging over the edge of his house, offset to the screen porch that he has now.
Okay.
So I hope I covered everybody's concerns.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Seitz? Thanks for your testimony. You could have a seat. I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting and see where we're at. Thoughts? Who wants to go first? Mr. Ms. Vitale?
I'm pretty familiar with the area. I had a friend that lived up around the curve, and the common area is pretty much common area that is undisturbed. I know that different people use common area in that neighborhood. I myself have been out cross-country skiing on the backside that faces Hollis off of there. And I know other people in the neighborhood had done similar things. On this little swath, I'm not quite sure if the neighbors have used it in that way, but it's pretty much just undisturbed land. The little 9 feet off the corner, I think that's pretty reasonable when you do it. It's still within that 20-foot setback that faces the two neighbors on that side. I would normally sometimes question that encroachment into the 20-yard setback, clear back to when I was on the Conservation Commission. And I do know that there is a tendency for people to use open land behind them, but it is open land, and at any time, if that's done, there's solutions to bring that to somebody's attention. The stuff underneath the deck to make the water go one direction or the other, I do question, and I think that should be thought about a little bit more as far as the runoff and directing it into one area. You know, we didn't hear if that was gonna be directed away from that side of the neighbor's property or to the back or whatever. I think that needs to be thought out a little bit more. I think it's better to have a, you know, drop straight down and soak in that way versus directing it somewhere unless it's taken care of putting it in a cistern or something, you know, whatever. Overall, I'm okay though with the plan. I just think that the applicant needs to especially think about that runoff part. I do like the crushed stone under the deck though.
All right, thank you. Mr. Boucher?
Sure. I'm very familiar with the area, with the common area on the other side of Frost Drive. I have a sister who has property that butts that common area, so I get to see it enough. And it's interesting because, you know, it's not the first time we've seen some common areas with special exceptions, especially in more of the newer neighborhoods. But, you know, I think it is what the butters and people do, right? So I know that from hearing from family that there's some abutters on the other side that use it as their leaf dumping ground and their, you know, trees and everything like that, but, and, you know, rocks and stuff like that, but, you know, no one's has acquired any of the land. So again, you know, I think you may have people that will do those types of things, but I haven't heard or got any feedback that there was anything different. So again, I'm not familiar with this side. You know, what we have to, you know, part of why we're here is that for the variances is part of one of the things we look at is you know, is there any special conditions to the property? Well, to begin with, 20% of the house, call it whatever, is out of the building envelope, right? So we have one side and the back that is built outside you know, in the setbacks. So that's an existing condition, a special condition of the property. So there's an existing 10 by 16 deck. So again, I take value in somebody saying, hey, is this really what this is? I also know and value what the community development division does and what Mr. Falk does. So I think that if there was any questions, I think what we've seen over the years is that we don't get things in front of us unless they've been checked thoroughly. And I think, again, Mr. Falk explained kind of how they look at decks. I think if there was any red flags that went up, this wouldn't have come to us at this point. So with that, what I'm saying is that there's a 10 by 16 deck. The applicant's proposing a larger deck, 20 by 40. There is a reference point, so it's you know, again, I know that the applicant did this plan up, but I think that, again, and the back of the house is a jog, and it's kind of easy to go from that reference point and go out and make some measurements. So I have every confidence that within the foot that this is going to be, you know, the deck, and this is what we're looking at. Again, I feel that though it is in that setback, the unique situation of the property and with the common land behind there, you know, we're not 5 feet from the property line and on top of another neighbor, you know, that's living right there on the other side of a fence or just line. So I feel comfortable with that aspect. The only thing that I would say is, and I would leave that more to your expertise, because you spent a lot of time with the Conservation Commission and you looked at this more running stuff. I know you're not an expert, but you kind of looked at those things. I would say that the only thing that I would do, and if, you know, when we get to the final motion, and if it's a positive type motion, that if we felt, I would just put some verbiage, I don't know if it'd be a stipulation that if he was going to want to divert water from, maybe the reason why he's asking is gonna put those pieces of styrofoam or plastic under the deck is not to get what's underneath there really wet. So I would just say, hey, we can put some verbiage in there that says any water that we're collecting there gets diverted onto his property and right at, within that area, into a central location. That does not leave his property. I know you're probably more familiar with that kind of verbiage, but that would be the only thing that I would have any concern about. Again, I look at the special conditions of the property. I think that, neighbors to the left have given, significant response on, hey, my privacy. The applicant has proposed to put some type of lattice work up for a blind. And I do believe that, look, when somebody, we've seen this before, when somebody builds a deck, and we've seen this before, and they build a deck, not only if you can look down, somebody can see you from down there, you can see the other way too, right? So it may be almost beneficial in both ways to have that blind there. So I would believe that the applicant would follow through with that. So I guess what I'm saying in general is that, except for, I would look towards you for the runoff situation under the deck, the water diversion, but other than that, I think that there is special conditions of the property, and I don't think that this is unreasonable. Yes, it's a large-scale deck, but given the area and where it's situated, I don't have an issue with that. And again, we are not an enforcement board, right? So it just like when there's ordinances in the city, right? We talk about signage, and somebody's not using their electronic sign the right way, and we lament about that, right? Or the drive-throughs are not working the way it's supposed to. Our board is not here to enforce that. That's in a different area. So I don't know what the enforcement is of that common property. All we can do is take what we hear, make a judgment that, there'd be no encroachment. And I believe that this homeowner is sincere and knows that there is common land there and that no one has encroached on that. So, so again, I would, at this point, be in support of the application.
Thank you. Ms. McKay?
So far, I concur with both of my fellow board members. The only, the big question I had was, again, mentioned by both of them, and that's why I asked the question, what was gonna go underneath gravel? I understood water could run through. But when they build those houses on those stilts, they'll sometimes put something underneath so that they can use the real estate that they've just now acquired to put things like he wants to put things under. So again, is there a way, and I'm thinking there probably has to be, where you could use some kind of gutter system, something to run the water off to the side. And I'm thinking that the person who's going to build the deck is probably going to be very familiar with this type of an issue, which would address the runoff situation. I like that he chose another neighbor's privacy idea and said, this works, and I'm going to adopt it so that my neighbors, your privacy is not impacted. He said he wanted to put a fence, so he's not gonna physically encroach beyond where his fence line is, so that would delineate out his property line even further. And he's got long-term planning, which says, I'm going to be here, I plan to be here, because he told us in the beginning, in the future, the reason why he made it so big is he could possibly require a lift, and so he wanted to utilize that. And I commend that long-term thinking. And so actually, if, like Mr. Boucher said, we're not enforcement, but Mr. Gooden was shaking his head yes when I was talking about that gutter system and having the water kind of directed away, or at least, well, yeah, away from the neighbor's property. So, in that case, I really don't have an objection to this at all.
Thank you. My thoughts on the matter of, what catches my attention a lot is the stormwater runoff. And the initial description of a deck with stone underneath, I was feeling real comfortable with, because I look at that and my 2 cents says that that's no different than not having a deck there. But if the water is channeled, now you're creating a much more, my sense is you're creating a lot of runoff. I can see the temptation or the want to have that channel, because then you can use that as storage underneath. My feeling is that can be accommodated by stipulating that if there's channeling of the stormwater, it is infiltrated. So in other words, it's not just gonna come down to a pipe and run down and possibly flood the abutters. My thought, and I also feel that in the application, it talks about this deck would replace the shed. The shed would go, and so if the stormwater were infiltrated on this deck and the shed is removed, that, in my mind, improves the stormwater runoff situation and leaves a better situation than what's there now. So I'm inclined to, I'm favorable to this with the stipulation that the stormwater is infiltrated and the shed is removed, and with that, I feel the situation is, that the stormwater runoff is improved. In terms of, like, the one abutter's comment about property value, I guess my sense is I don't think it affects it one way or the other. On one hand, if there's an attractive deck that's used within reason, that probably ups, a rising tide for everyone. If it were a lot noisy and stuff like that, I think that would be problematic. But my sense is that this homeowner is gonna, has been there a long time and is gonna respect privacy and such like that. So I'm inclined to approve with the stipulation about the stormwater runoff being infiltrated without a specific design, because I don't even know how to design it, but I know it can be done with a little professional guidance. So if,
You want to make it?
I'm happy to make a motion and we can talk about the motion.
Sure, and I would just say, with that stipulation, I think it's just worded that if he decides to divert water, so not like he has to do it no matter what happens, because he may decide in the end, I don't want to do it.
Right,
So just as long as he has that option,
sure.
okay?
Yeah, I would agree. It could be that when he finally decides on which person is gonna build the deck, they'll have some ideas on how to accommodate that also.
All right. I'll hazard a motion. I'm making a motion on behalf of Austin Gooden, 11 Hampton Drive. And again, the request is to encroach up to 28 feet into the 40-foot required rear yard setback to replace an existing 10 by 16 deck with a 20 by 40-foot deck. I believe the board finds a variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, which is basically using a large deck for personal purposes behind the house. I think the board finds that this large deck is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance and will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. I do have two special conditions. One is, per the application, the existing shed would be removed, and the new deck, the 20 by 40 deck, would either, by design, would have stone underneath for infiltration, and would either be left constructed in that fashion, or if the stormwater is channelized in any way under the deck, that'll be infiltrated. And I think the board finds that with those stipulations, the stormwater runoff situation would be improved for the abutters than the current situation. And with those two stipulations, I think this request is not contrary to public interest and substantial justice is served. So there's a second to the motion by Mr. Boucher. Any discussion on the motion? Show of hands in favor of the motion. So that's 4-0, so that's approved. So Mr. Gooden, your application is approved. Just remember, there's always that 30-day window of appeal. If we get a request for rehearing and we do decide to rehear it, that would stay the approval. So you might, my personal suggestion would be, you might want to wait out those 30 days and see what happens, but you're good to go right now. So with that, I'll close case number 1, and thanks for the folks coming here this evening. All right. You ready to go on? Are you good to keep going? All right, we're going to get, open the public meeting, public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Falk.
No, you could just give Mr. Falk a call in the morning with any follow-up questions, and you're all set for now. So we're going to get into case number 2. Anyway, case number 2, the land is at, what is the address? I'm sorry, I think it's 73 King Street. And the request for the following variances. Number 1, lot width 60 feet is required. This is 73 King Street. 50 feet is existing. And number 2, lot area 6,000 square feet is required. Excuse me, existing is 5,750 square feet. And this is to construct a new single-family home on a legal, non-conforming lot of record. Again, 73 King Street.
Ready.
Take it away.
For the record, my name is Richard Manon, a professional engineer with Manon and Paquette of Nashua, here representing the applicant Colebrook Homes LLC with regard to an existing lot at 73 King Street. The lot is also known as Lot 10, Map 13. It is located in the RB zone. The lot is 50 by 115 feet in size, or 5,750 square feet, whereas 6,000 square feet is now required in this zone. The lot width is 50 feet versus 60 feet now required in the zone. The lot was created by a subdivision plan dated May 11th, 1889, recorded in the Hillsborough County Registry as Plan Number 113-2, which is this plan I have here, and there's the lot in question. The lot, again, was part of a subdivision plan dated May 20th, 1922, recorded in the registry as Plan Number 512A, which is this plan down here. Hard to read, but nevertheless, the lots are shown there. It is easy to see that all the lots in this neighborhood are essentially the same size, but per these plans. These are considered legal, non-conforming lots of record. And I'll repeat these. These are legal, non-conforming lots of record. Over the years, the lots have gone through some adjustments, and homes, single-family and duplexes, have been built. Currently, there are 25 homes, singles and duplexes, built on lots essentially the same size as the lot before the board for approval. These 25 lots are all legal, non-conforming lots of record, and these lots are shaded yellow, that was in your packet, and those are the 25 lots that are similar or less in size to the one that's before you. These lots are all roughly 50 by 115 in size, all less than the currently required 6,000 square feet and 60 feet of lot width. The request before you is not if this lot is a legal lot. The request is for permission to build a single-family house. With regard to the variance criteria, a new home in this older neighborhood will be very similar to the existing homes. It is well understood that new homes tend to enhance neighborhood property values. There are 25 other lots similar in size and configuration to the pre-existing lot at 73 King Street. A new home on this lot, in character with the neighborhood, would not be contrary to the public interest. This would also provide a moderately priced home that is badly needed in our city. The request meets the spirit of the ordinance in that the lot size is just under the current 6,000 square foot requirement. The frontage requirement has been met, and the lot width is very similar to the 25 or more lots in the overall neighborhood. Substantial justice would be done, as would allow my client to build a single-family home on a legal, non-conforming lot of record, just as 25 other lots in this neighborhood currently exist. With regard to hardship, this is a legally created non-conforming lot of record since 1889. It is very much in character with the neighborhood. RSA 674-39A, Roman numeral 1, or last sentence states, no city may merge pre-existing subdivided lots except upon consent of the owner. In this particular case, the request before the board is for permission to build a home on the legal non-conforming lot of record. Denial of this permission would deny my client a reasonable use of his property. In summary, this is a neighborhood of moderately sized lots with homes, 25 of which were very similar to the request before you. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Maynard? I have a question for you. It looks like this lot is currently associated with number 75. I don't know that for sure, but that's my sense, but I was wondering.
It has been in the past, correct.
Okay.
That's the lot to the left, if you're standing
As
in
you're
the street.
looking at it from the street. And the lot to the left, number 75, when I looked at, has two, I think it has two driveways. I didn't know if the driveway on the left is for number 77, or if the driveway
There are
on...
two drives, one on either side of the building. The one on the left is to serve 75. The one on the right is for access into 73, into that area.
Okay. And then with the proposed, 50-foot of this lot, how far from the lot line is number 75 on the number 73 side?
I don't know that exact answer, Jack, but it's probably about 5 to 7 feet, which is what I'm pretty sure the side setbacks are in that zone.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not on the lot line, no.
Not on the lot. All right, I was just, when I look at this picture, it looked to me like
Yeah.
it might be on the lot line, but it didn't really look that way when I saw it,
Yeah,
but
it's
I
not
was...
on the lot line.
Okay.
Those aerial GIS things are a little deceiving sometimes because they're essentially the tax map superimposed on an aerial photo, and they do their best to make a match, but then they're off 5 to 10 feet quite often. So,
All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Maynard? Seeing none, you could have a
Thank you.
seat. Anyone else to speak with support for the requested new house at 73 King Street? Anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition? We do have a letter on file from, put my glasses on, Luke and Jamie Tanariello. Are they here this evening? No, okay. Well, I think I'll read this into the record. So this is dated today, June 13th. It says, "Dear members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment." I'm sorry?
the address.
Oh, okay. This is Luke and Jamie Tanariello at 74 King Street. 74 King Street. I would like to voice my opposition to the applicant's request for a variance to construct a new single-family home dwelling on the abutting lot adjacent to the existing two-family home at 75 King Street. While I understand and conceptually agree with responsible development, I do not believe the construction of a new home will be responsible or advantageous for the following reasons. There's two reasons here. Number one, adding a new home will not enhance the values of the abutting properties in this case because you will create a non-conforming lot to serve the existing two-family, and there would be more congestion added to the neighborhood. If there were no structures on both existing lots, then I could see the added value of allowing two new single-family homes. However, that is not the case. There already exists a grandfathered two-family dwelling on an already undersized non-conforming lot. I would like the character of the neighborhood to remain as is. It goes on to say the lot appears to be approximately 11,500 square feet in total, when 12,446 square feet is needed for a two-family dwelling, and an additional 6,000 square feet would be needed for a single-family dwelling. And number two, it appears the existing structure is about 1.5 to 2 feet from the proposed lot line. I believe 7 feet is required in an RB zone. I do not believe it is good practice to create such nonconformity. And again, that's from Luke and Jamie Tanariello at 74 King Street. Is there any other person with questions or concerns? I see a hand here. If you'd like to come to the microphone. While that fellow's making his way up here, is there anybody else going to be speaking about 73 King Street? We have a woman there. Okay, so I see yourself. All right, go ahead. If you could give us your name and address.
My name's Pat Corrigan. I live at 71 King Street, which is the other abutting property.
Hi, welcome. What's on your mind?
Well, I have several concerns, and number one, I've seen over the last 5 or 10 years, some of the properties that they're building, like houses 7, 8 feet away from each other, and just, it does degrade the neighborhood. Number two, it's like, I've owned this property for 30 years, and I just, quite honestly, I'm really very concerned about trying to sell my house with somebody living 14 feet away. You know, it's, let me ask you this. Is your house, where's your neighbor? Is he 14 feet away from you? It's gotten to the point where it's just lowered the value of the whole neighborhood. It's trying to make Crown Hill inner city is what's happening. And I'm just very concerned for that. One of the problems is water, okay? I have, my house is built in the 1890s. I have a old stone foundation. It's granite blocks. But, okay, now you take, say it's a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot house, and you take the water, and now you're pushing half of that water towards my house 14 feet away. What's going to happen to that water? Where's it going to go? I live downhill from that property, so that's a concern. I just really think that the city of Nashua needs to take a good look at what they're doing, because I just don't want to see Nashua turn into a Lowell or Lawrence, and I see that on my street. I mean, they've built 4 or 5 of these houses, and it's a horror show. It really is, and it's downgrading the whole neighborhood. And again, you know, I mean, I'm looking at the resale house value of my home, and I'm just totally worried about that.
Okay,
I mean, not only that, there's parking and there's other issues, but, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but
well, we're gonna be having Mr. Maynard address those questions here
All right.
in just a minute. Wait, are there any questions? And I'm sorry, was it Corson, Mr.?
excuse me?
Your last name was a
Corrigan, C-O-R-R-I-G-A-N.
All right, you got it. Oh, she's good at spelling. I would have guessed wrong. Actually, Ms. Vitale has a question for you, Mr. Corrigan.
Had you seen the lot layout?
No, I haven't,
That's
I
right
haven't
up-
seen anything, and I'm just looking at it right now. And they would be, if I sat on my porch, I'd be looking at the side of a building. That'd be my view.
The one that I'm wondering if you'd ever seen is the original where they were all laid out exactly the same size at the time.
Oh, in the 1800s? I think I have a copy of that, but, I mean, I'm just, again, saying I've lived there for 30 years. Obviously, you know, I don't begrudge anybody to do what they want on their property, but again, it's a non-conforming lot, and I'm just looking at, you know, this drawing. They're going to be, they might as well camp out in my backyard.
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you remember when you bought your home?
Yep.
Any conversation about the open lots in the neighborhood, and were they intended to be used in one way or the other, or were they all intended to be built on at some point?
No, some
Or you
people-
didn't think about it?
Some people had bought a lot, and some people had bought double lots because they wanted bigger yards. I mean, that's
Okay,
just the way it was, but again, you know, it's a non-conforming lot. I just have a very hard time with somebody being like 3 feet away from me. I mean, it's crowded enough in the city, and I work in Boston every day, and trust me, some days it's a horror show to go to work. It takes hours, and all it takes is one person to, you know the story. I'm sure you've sat in traffic.
I lived in Florida with 7-foot lot lines, so.
Yeah.
I do, okay.
Actually, I have a question. Just out of curiosity, the yard that's 73 King Street is now, looks to me to be a yard. Is that just used as a garden or something?
Yeah, it's
for
a
the-
garden.
For the,
Yes.
okay. I'm just curious what it had been. You've been there a long time and it's
No, I have my garden right next to the
just to the
lawn,
lot
so,
line,
you
yeah.
know, it's kind of cool coming home and, you know, hey, I've got some cucumbers and, you know,
All right, well,
have a
thank,
couple of fresh tomatoes or whatever, you know what I mean?
sure. Any other questions for Mr. Corrigan?
No.
No? All right, thank you. And ma'am, would like to have some testimony?
I'm Vivian Marcoux. Whoops,
You can-
sorry, I
okay,
just
there.
wanted it high enough. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Very good.
Thank you.
I reside at 75 King Street,
75, uh-huh.
so I'm here to support the abutters. I've lived there for over 60 years, and it has been a garden. My grandfather used to do vegetables. I do flowers, so it's a perennial garden. I have the issue about the non-conforming lots, the existing two-family. We do use that driveway at 73 King Street that you're talking about. I have one on the side of the porch. I use that one. The tenant downstairs has a truck. He's got a work van. He's got a trailer. Where is that person going to be parking if the opposite driveway is 73 King Street?
I don't know. If you're asking me, I don't have an answer to that one.
Okay.
But I'm sorry, did you have more testimony, or?
Sure. I just want to emphasize what Pat said. Down the hill, there are many, one-family houses that have been built on probably variances that have been approved by the board, and it is not a pretty sight. It has not enhanced the neighborhood whatsoever. You have people that are proud of their homes, but then you have some that are not, and most of them have brought down the character of the neighborhood. And you have the kids, they don't have any, the front yards are all parking lots. They have their driveways there, so the kids can't play in the front yard, so they play in the street. So you have to be careful about that. And I mean, it is all along the area down the hill from where this, 75 King Street. So I agree with my neighbor, Jamie and Luke Tenerello, that two conforming lots does not give enough, space for a new single-family home, especially in the wintertime. Where are you going to put that snow? Their driveways are probably going to, it's just too crowded, too crowded. It does look like the inner city. And I know that, past practices that you have approved, variances on some smaller lots, but I do not see that this is going to enhance the neighborhood.
All right.
Any
Mr.
questions?
Boucher has a question for you.
Just to clarify, Ms. Marco, you said you lived at 75?
I do?
And did I hear correctly that the tenant that lives below you, or was renting below you, parks their vehicles on 73?
He's parking in that driveway.
Okay, all right. Okay, I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Right, so if
Okay.
my driveway is even, extended on the side of the porch where the building 75 King Street, there won't be any side yard.
Right.
I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Actually, I have another question
Sure.
for you. Do you own 75 King Street?
Excuse me?
Do you own 75 King Street?
No, I'm a tenant.
You're a tenant, okay, because the
It
reason
was
I was
my
asking was I was wondering.
It was
if
my
you knew-
grandparents' house.
Oh, I'm sorry?
It was my grandparents' house,
Uh-huh.
and then they passed away, and then my aunt inherited the house, and then she had to sell it in February. I stayed on as a tenant.
I see. Do you know how far from the lot line is to the side of the house on,
I think the measurements, I don't.
you don't know, okay.
That maybe they're in the abutted letters. I'm not good with measurements, sorry.
Okay, so, all right, that's it for my questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Was there anyone else with questions or concerns or opposition to the proposed house at 73 King Street? Seeing none, Mr. Maynard, would you like to address the concerns we've heard? The water, the parking, thank you. Take it away.
First of all, I'll address your concerns, Mr. Chairman. You're worried about the conformity of the duplex to the left with regard to the side setback. Regardless, that's a separate lot of record. Regardless of any nonconformities, you're not allowed to merge, forced merger of nonconforming lots for any reason. That, they passed that law a couple of years ago, and that practice is no longer allowed. So your consideration of it is contrary to recent law in that regard.
Well, I'm not considering it.
Well,
You might think
you
I
bring
am.
it up, but, so I'm just addressing it, so.
I was just curious
I
how far
appreciate
the
that you're
lot
not
line
considering
is.
it. This is no question, this is a distinct, separate legal lot of record, albeit non-conforming. This neighborhood, as you notice from the old plans, is full of these lots, and there are currently 25 of them that still remain as same size, similar to what we have here. And over the years, this board and Mr. Carter, et cetera, are well aware that infilled homes have been built on various lots within the Crown Hill neighborhood. Crown Hill neighborhood remains a stable, middle-class neighborhood. Property values do not plummet because somebody built on a vacant lot in a neighborhood. In fact, it's a well-established principle that new construction in a neighborhood demonstrates that people value the neighborhood and therefore will invest in the neighborhood. So it tends to enhance property values. It does not create negative property values. The fact that the person at 71 High Street is worried about something being 14 feet away, well, that's the nature of the Crown Hill neighborhood. He's not the only one that would have an adjacent home 14 feet away. The side setbacks are 7 feet, I believe. So whether that's all throughout this particular neighborhood, that's the character of the neighborhood, that's the zone requirement, that's the ordinance, et cetera. So in that regard, I'm not sure about what the runoff question was. Oh, he had a stone foundation. Well, I'm not aware of any water problems in the Crown Hill neighborhood, and I do believe they have well-draining soils. What's going to happen here is the house will be constructed, it'll likely have gutters, and it'll drain towards the street. And it'll enter the street drainage, this public street drainage, just like any other subdivision, typical subdivisions, except people that live next to brooks that overflow, so. But anyway, what construction in this lot is not going to impact the foundation of the adjacent lot. If he has a pre-existing water problem, well, this construction of a home on this lot will have nothing to do with it. So this is a classic, I'll use the slang word NIMBY. People don't like their neighborhood to change. They don't like people to build on infill lots. These vacant lots are there for a purpose. People have invested in them. They've retained them over time as an investment. They have a right to use the lot for a reasonable purpose. In this particular case, we're not asking for a duplex. There are several duplexes on these smaller lots in this neighborhood, as you just heard next door by the tenant. We're only asking for a single-family home. And just so you understand, the lot at 75 is exactly the same size as our lot, and they have a duplex on it, so that's an extreme nonconformity in that regard. We are, working with the ordinance and only looking to build a single-family home, very much in character with every other home in this Crown Hill particular neighborhood. Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Boucher?
So, Mr. Mayor, you've been in front of us several times with new homes. So just to clarify for the rest of the audience, what is, once you get to the building stage, to the planning board, or, I mean, to the stage where you're building a home, what's the responsibilities of the builder when it comes to runoff? Your responsibilities,
Oh. You're not allowed to alter the direction of the, overall direction of the runoff, nor are you allowed to concentrate it and let it run off onto your neighbor's property. In this particular case, it'll be directed towards the street drainage system. Is liable to be foundation drains, footing drains, foundation drains, they call footing drains, connected to the city drain system. That determination is made once the excavation is made for the foundation. We were allowed to observe the soils and see what the consideration is. But my suspicion is, based on my general knowledge, I've been around for quite a while, that the soils in the Crown Hill neighborhood are pretty good. They're fairly well draining. I have yet to hear any true drainage problem in the Crown Hill neighborhood that you're maybe referring to, so. I wonder if I think I've answered your
right,
question.
so just to follow up, not only yourself, there's other professional engineers that have come before us, and my general understanding is that you cannot make anything worse than it is currently, and in some cases are able to make things a little better. But that's the positive side. But again, to just put it in layman's terms, you cannot make it any worse than what it is. So meaning to say,
You can't create a problem
Right.
or increase
Increase-
whatever problem might
right.
be there now.
right,
You can't.
Okay.
And in this particular case, this is the builder, and the builder's well aware of that. The city's well aware of that. And when the building permits are put in, there are some safeguards that require me to still continue with some involvement, especially looking at the groundwater problem to see if we need foundation drains, footing drains, and whether the soils are well drained or not. Beyond that, in these particular cases, professional engineers don't have a big involvement.
Right.
It falls to the city inspectors and the builder.
all right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? I just had one, just to clarify, if this were approved, would there be off-street parking with this house?
Yes, there has to be.
Has to be. I just wanted to have that on record,
Yeah.
so. All right, thanks. No, I'm all set. Let's see, would Mr. Corrigan or, I've forgotten,
Mrs. Marcoux.
Marcoux, one of you two, would you like to come up with further testimony to address what Mr. Maynard just said, or are you okay with, and are okay to rest? One of you two has the right to come up and address what Mr. Maynard said, if you have something in regard to what his testimony is. Thank you. Again, this is Pat Corrigan.
Right. As far as my neighbor's house, it's a two-family house. They have an apartment upstairs and an apartment downstairs. So there's obviously two people parking there. Currently, they have one driveway on one side of the house and one driveway on the other side of the house. When Vivian's aunt passed away, they liquidated the property, and whoever bought it was fortunate. I mean, they let her keep her apartment, and she's now a tenant. But if you take one of those driveways away, then somebody's going to be parking on the street, because there's no way to expand the driveway on the other side of the house to keep that two-family. Somebody's going to have to park on the street. There's no two ways about it, because there's no place to expand it. It's that simple. The house is that close to the road, and there is a sidewalk there, so, yeah, there's no place to expand it. So there is going to be somebody parking on the street, and you can't do that in the city of Nashville, especially when it snows. Yeah, there's no way. So I don't think that's right. As far as the water, I don't have water issues, but again, you're going to put you're pushing half the water that falls on the ground right now towards my house. And what happens all of a sudden next year when I've got a new new house 14 feet away from me that my cellar's full of water. I've never had water before, ever. And the fact is now it's 3 houses down. Always, every spring, the backyard is always flooded, always flooded. And that's just because water coming off the hill. I mean, there's no drainage back there. It doesn't drain towards the street, so. He's talking about the street drain. Again, you know, that's just pushing more water towards my house and in front of my driveway, so.
Questions for Mr. Corrigan? I think we're all set.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Ms. Vitale, jump right in.
So there's been some discussion about number 75 having the driveway on the one side and a driveway that's being used on the other side, which technically is over the lot line. You mentioned before about the 2 properties being used together. And since there is a requirement for off-street parking, not that it has to do with this, but for my own answer, for 75, was there a requirement for the off-street parking that should have been on 75 when that was approved as a duplex, or was that before the current zoning laws and they fall under?
That house was built way before the zoning laws, so it's grandfathered in for what it is.
So in a situation like this where they fall before and it's a duplex, do they have to, they should adhere to the current zoning laws, or, you know, the way it's used right now? How does that work? Because we can't really consider that as part of the lot that we're looking at. But there is that consideration, because we also have to consider the whole neighborhood.
Well, that's a really good question, because right now, if they're using that driveway for parking for 75, and if it's not gonna be there anymore, I guess the applicant's gonna have to really address where those people are gonna park. It would really be becoming more non-conforming by taking away those spaces.
Well, so you're saying that this lot, 73, becomes more non-conforming, or they're forcing 75 to become non-conforming?
That's the
More
lot with the house on
non-conforming.
it already, 75.
Say that again?
It'd be 75, it'd be becoming more non-conforming because it would be taking away spaces that they've been using historically.
So the development on 73 is causing 75 to become more non-conforming?
Unless they can provide 2 more parking spaces somewhere.
Okay.
Mr. Boucher?
I think I understand where you're coming from, and again, you're right, we can't really consider that lot. Really, the fact of the matter is that the owner of that 2-family has got an issue to deal with, okay? And that parking issue is again, you know and I know that I don't know what that guy's gonna put 3 vehicles, and I don't know if they're gonna play musical cars, but unfortunately, that's the situation. And I think we keep, you know, in this case here, I think it's kind of, we're looking at this as it's one lot. We're not separating a lot, we're not creating 2 lots. It's again, we're talking about this one single lot that has just changed, the requirement for the width has changed over the years, but it's still a legal lot, so it is a separate lot. Unfortunately, like I said, some folks have bought 2 lots and are using it, and this person who's lived at 75 has had the enjoyment of that driveway, and that's great. But again, property's been sold, and it is a separate lot of record. So, again, you know, just because somebody's been parking an empty lot doesn't make everything else okay. But I don't think that it's gonna have a bearing. Yes, there'll be a burden placed on number 75, but I don't think that's, again, I look at this as not really the board's purview, or we know it exists, but But again, I don't think this will weigh on my decision. I just think that personally, I think my opinion is that that landlord there is gonna have an issue to deal with, and whether or not this gentleman who rents is gonna be able to stay or not, I don't know, but that's really an aside to that.
Well, I completely agree, except that we have answers for number 3 and number 4. One, will it affect the property values of the surrounding parcels? And in my mind, part of this is that you have a duplex that is currently there, that they should be parking it there. Does that affect the value of that duplex? Because now you would assume that you would have a certain number of cars with a duplex. So in the past, when we've ever considered duplexes, we say, how many cars are gonna be parked in this duplex? This was approved before the current zoning laws. So I think, I think about that property value thing. It maybe isn't relevant because it's a separate property, but, and then, contrary to the public interest, is there any weight on that, and do we look at it as this is, where does the public interest fall on something like this? In this decision on a legal, non-conforming lot that's obviously, when they separated out the properties and everything, this is one that the duplex was allowed next door, very close to the property line, and it's a duplex versus a single-family house, and there was no plans for the parking down the road. How do we get through that discussion?
This one?
Go.
I'm sorry,
No.
is that right? Oh, I don't wanna take anybody's thunder.
No, go
all
for
right.
it.
If you want to go, no?
Oh, all right, Ms. McKay, you wanna jump in, or?
I agree with Ms. Vitale. In number 3, I think it will adversely affect the property values of the house next door. It's gonna certainly affect the use. While it was there prior to the zoning laws that we utilize now, it was there. It was in existence. So how do we unexist it to go with what the property owner of 73 wants to do? I don't know that we can. I know we're not supposed to consider that, but it says will not adversely affect property values. It will affect them, and I don't know that substantial justice would be met either. I have a problem with this one. I have a real problem with this. It's a conundrum.
Go ahead, Mr. Boucher.
Let me just try to tell you where I'm coming from. And so we determined that and I don't want to focus so much on the property next door, but I'm going to, because this is where the discussion is. I'm going to try to tell you where I'm coming from. So there's an existing property like next door, a duplex that everybody's concerned about, because if not for mostly what the parking is, right? So there's an existing duplex next door, and we're talking about parking. A tenant who has testified that there's 3 vehicles that are being parked there, a trailer, 2 vehicles. If we talk about the fact that this is pre-existing, this is a home that was built many years ago, if you want to look at that way, then we can also say that we can determine that many years ago is also known that people didn't have multiple vehicles, okay? So, again, if you want to relate that, then we can try to relate it orange to oranges and not orange to apples, but, I can make an argument that really, that's the case. And as far as property values, again, we don't have any real data in front of us. I think if I was a buyer coming to look at that property, I'm asking you, where's the property line, and what is it that I'm buying? And I'm gonna buy a duplex that can be rented, and so there's income to be made, no matter how it is. And if I wanna buy a property to make money or to rent, then I'm looking at it as an investment to do so. And then I'm considering what's there for a driveway. I'm not going there and going, oh, the neighbors got extra land, I got extra parking spaces. So, for me, I've kind of put that to bed, because, to me, it's not material, because this is not a large lot that we're being asked to, like we've done in the past. We've had applications where we've asked for lots to be split, to create another lot that becomes non-conforming with some non-conformance. This is an existing legal lot, and I think that that's important, that's an existing legal lot. So what we're here really to do is really to talk, to look at the fact that there was pre-existing zoning, and the zoning changed, and now it's required 60, it used to be 50, right? If we don't allow this, I believe what we're doing is it's like a taking, right? So now we've completely said that the legal lot now, so again, we're not creating a lot, it's already a legal lot. So it's not like we've had these discussions before, like, oh, if we create this lot, you know, can we do harm to the owner? If it's a lot that somebody was asking to split, then we could say, hey, this is not a legal taking, because it was never two separate lots to begin with. You're asking for two separate lots and they want to non-conform. This is a legal lot. And again, I don't sit here being unappreciative of the neighborhood, but also understand that, again, I think it's very clear to us in writings in the Office of Engineering and Planning and some of the seminars that we take, that when there's a legal lot, you know, there's no way we can just disallow it as a taking.
I think we're going to take a 5-minute recess. Folks, we're just taking a 5-minute recess here, and then we'll be back in session.
No, sorry.
So we will just 5 minutes, and then we'll be back. If you want to take a break, feel free. Restrooms are right out there. still on here, so, are we ready to come back into session?
Do we have to wait for Carter?
No, this is on here, so
Oh,
we're
okay.
being recorded. So, okay, folks, we're gonna come back into session, so, Mr. Boucher, had you wrapped up what your point was?
Yes, so just to summarize, before we went to break,
Yeah, I can listen.
I believe that the number 75 is an existing house, predates zoning, as we talked about. I believe that.
Folks, could we have a quiet in the audience, please? Thank you.
I believe that unfortunately, there may be an impact to the owner and tenants of number 75, but has really no material impact for me on this property. And again, as far as property values, I think it is something that, can be interpreted different ways. But again, I think that, when we talk about property values, and to really make that determination, I think we really need to have some hard facts or data in front of us to really use that as determination one way or another. Again, we have our opinions, right? And I completely see where you're coming from. I have my opinions, and sometimes they're the opposite. But I think we don't have anything on paper that says, hey, we just did valuations, we did this, we did that, and it was very objective, and this is what we came up with, and this is sales in the neighborhood, this is, sales that plummeted, or when a new house went in. We don't have that in front of us. Change is always difficult, and I do not minimize that at all. But again, this is a legal lot of record that we are looking at. Two things are happening. Obviously, houses are not built like they used to be built. They are built with lots of consideration to not impact surrounding property. And the second point I just forgot, but it was important. If I remember, I'll tell you. But so again, that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, I understand, I completely get where you're coming from. I know as an abutter what happens when somebody builds something on a smaller lot and you think that it's gonna be awful and it turns out to be okay. And back when I first came here, I lived at 41 Haynes Street, so I pretty much know this neighborhood. And so thank you for all of your insight. I understand we really can't look at the lot. I think emotionally, it's hard sometimes not to place yourself in everybody's shoes and try and figure out a solution. So.
I'd just like to jump in myself, and I see this case pretty much like Mr. Boucher does. Do I agree that Mr. Corrigan, would rather not have a house next to him? Sure. I mean, emotionally, I agree with that 100%, and with Ms. Marcoux, I look at the parking situation at 75 as what seems to be happening now is one of the tenants is enjoying the use of parking on an abutter's property that doesn't care that they park there, but is very necessary, it seems, if the person has 3 vehicles. But that's, 73 is now a different lot. And so that's gonna have to be addressed, and I don't see that as part of this case. I mean, I've seen it like Mr. Boucher does, because that's a separate lot. You can make a decision here kind of emotionally or legally, and I look at, from the training we received, I guess I see it as Mr. Boucher, that this is a legal lot of record. There's other lots in the neighborhood. I think there's not hard data that says property values are gonna go down. We've heard that a lot, and, when a lot is developed in a vacant lot, folks next to it feel, well, this is gonna decrease my value, and we also see, well, this is part of a neighborhood, and there's all these 50-foot lots, many of them, not all, many of them up and down the street, and this is just another house going in, and it's a change. So while I empathize with Mr. Corrigan and Ms. Marcoux, I feel I have to find support legally for this. I think it would be wrong to not find support for it. I mean, the issue of the water, I have faith that if this is approved, and if a foundation goes in, it'll be assessed, and there won't be a negative impact as in more runoff. I mean, Mr. Maynard was saying it'll go to the street. If that happens, that's fine. I think it would solve the problem. If it's runoff is gonna go to the back and flood someone else, I think that'll be addressed with the measures such as in-ground infiltration. So that, to me, isn't the deal breaker here. And even though I think, you know, it's a disappointment to the abutters, I feel legally I have to approve this. And that's where I'm at on it, but that's just my opinion. Ms. Vitale?
I do actually agree with you. There was no testimony regarding values. We won't know about the values until later, you know, because there is no testimony that states otherwise right now. And I do understand it being a legal lot of record, so that part I'm all good with. I actually agree with everything. I bring it up only because I do think there are questions about it that we needed to vet out a little bit. I did have one question for Mr. Carter. Were these two properties ever owned by the same people?
I believe they were at one point. I'm not 100% sure.
So
They were,
this
though.
might have come out because at the passing of the aunt, they were separated, and the legal lot of record, they were never combined, even though they were used by the same person. Is that what I'm understanding?
I think that is the case, but also, you know, the state laws were changed a couple of years ago so that we can't combine these lots anymore. You know,
I
assessing or
understand.
zoning or tax departments can't involuntarily combine them, so.
Okay, that was why I was, you know, just wondering how it developed that they were used in the way that they were, and then it was occurred to me about it, who was listed as the owner of the property, and I thought that it might be that. Okay, I'm good.
Just a thought on, you know, I don't think we know if it's joint, you know, owned by the same person or not, but in either case, if it's owned by separate entities, number 75 has a problem with the parking situation of one of the tenants that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
If it's owned by the same person who's maybe seen if they can get a variance and then will sell it off, that person will have a problem, or it might be an eye-opener to say, oh, if I sell this lot off, number 73, I have a tenant that's gonna have a problem, because it seems that from the information we have, they're not able to park on 75, but either way, that doesn't affect my decision. I feel that because of the lot is legal non-conforming, I feel I need to vote favorably on this.
Well, and if I can
Jump
jump
right
in
in.
for a few minutes. I'm glad that Ms. Vitale brought everything out that she did, because the thoughts were in my head. But rationally and logically, I understand legal versus, you know, emotional. And legally, they are, as Mr. Maynard pointed out, legal non-conforming lots of record, and there are 25 of them. And we have to deal with them as such. And so, you make a good point, so does Mr. Boucher.
Well, at this point, Mr. Boucher, would you like to forward
Sure.
a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance for Colin Brook Homes LLC. Address is L King Street, and also like to add, also known as 73 King Street. The description is requesting the following variances: lot width 60 feet required, 50 feet existing, and 2, lot area 6,000 square feet, 5,750 square feet existing, to construct a new single-family home on a legal, non-conforming lot of record. It is zoned in the RB zone, and the code section that this is applicable to is 190-16, table 16-3. The variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. We spent time and length, the applicant spoke at length at the construction of this neighborhood from the 1800s till now, and reviewing the many lots, I think 25 exactly, that have the 50-foot existing frontage on the lots. So again, given the special conditions of the property as stated, and the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by other method reasonable feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. It is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. We spent some time discussing this, and again, we do not have any testimony or hard evidence that leads us to believe this in one way or another. We believe it is not contrary to public interest, and we believe that substantial justice would be served. So I make a motion to approve the area variance, the variance.
I'll second the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion of the motion, ask for a show of hands in favor of the motion. That's 4, so none opposed. So that application is approved. And with that, I'll close a public meeting on case number 2. Are we good to keep going? So we're going to open a public hearing on case number 3. Case number 3, I'll read into the record. It's land and address 50 Bowers Street. The request is for 2 variances. Part 1 is minimum lot area, 6,970 square feet required, but 5,072 square feet is existing, and that would be to construct a 2-family structure on lot 66. But there's also a part 2, which is to allow 2 principal structures on 1 consolidated lot, assuming that a 2-family variance on lot 66 is granted. So that is the request, and this is a split RB-RC zone. So, Mr. Maynard, you could take it away.
Okay. For the record, my name is Richard Maynard, professional engineer with Maynard & Paquette, representing Mr. Gil's Kirion with regard to his property on Bowers Street, east of the Harbor Avenue intersection. The property in question is a vacant lot containing 5,072 square feet, essentially at what would be called 54 Bowers Street, otherwise known as map 29, lot 66. As you can see from the survey plot plan, which is that one, and the zoning map, this vacant lot is extremely unique in numerous ways. The skewed and long and narrow shape, essentially 40 feet wide by 172 feet deep, is quite unusual. The zoning is also quite unusual. The lot itself is split zoned, RC and RB. The majority of the lot is in the RC zone, therefore the RC zone ordinance requirements govern per the ordinance requirements. To the east, on the right, is the GI General Industrial Zone. And to the west across Harbor Avenue is the D3 mixed-use zones. So in this immediate neighborhood, all at this lot, we have 4 different zones coming together with this lot, extremely unique in the city of Nashua. The neighborhood around this vacant lot is an extreme mix of various uses. To the north, at 36 Harbor Ave, is a residence and a carpentry shop and business. Across Harbor Avenue is a large building formerly the YMCA, which houses various hospital, doctors, and business offices. To the south is a large parking lot serving the various Southern New Hampshire hospital offices and facilities. At the southeast corner of Harbor Avenue and Bauer Street is another building with a store and 11 residential units. The residential density is only 715 square feet per unit on that particular property. The next three properties to the east are duplexes with densities on the order of 1722 square feet per unit and 1960 square feet per unit, quite dense. The request before the board is to allow a duplex on a 5,072 square foot lot where 6,970 square feet is required. This is a per-unit density of 2536 square feet per unit, as opposed to various existing and adjacent properties with residential densities of 715 square feet per unit, 1722 square feet per unit, 1960 square feet per unit, and 1434 square feet per unit. So we're substantially above the existing, we're substantially above or less dense than the existing portion of this neighborhood that's residential. The proposed duplex would have a density of 1 unit per 2,500 square feet, which is substantially better than the neighborhood. With regard to this variance criteria, the proposed duplex will not be contrary to the public interest. There are numerous duplexes on some substantially undersized lots in this immediate area. There are also 2 high-density multifamily properties in the area, in the immediate abutting area. The area is a mixed-use neighborhood of various types of residential plus commercial uses, including a convenience store, a carpentry shop, the former Y Hospital building and their high density, they're very large parking lots. So this is definitely a classic mixed-use, older natural neighborhood. The proposed duplex will observe the spirit of the ordinance. It meets all the criteria except for lot size, and the lot size proposed for the duplex is substantially larger than all of its neighbors and just barely below what's required by the ordinance. Substantial justice will be done as it will allow this property owner a reasonable use of this property in a very mixed-use and non-conforming neighborhood. It should be reasonably obvious that a duplex in this older mixed-use neighborhood will enhance property values. With regard to hardship, I outlined in the beginning of my presentation the very unique and unusual nature of this lot, the existing neighborhood uses and the densities, and the confluence of 4 different zones. It appears that a duplex to us, is a very reasonable use for this property in a neighborhood of a wide variety of uses. The board's favorable consideration of this request would be appreciated. I would ask that we take up this case, the board reach a decision, and depending on what the board decides, we'll decide whether we go forward with the second part or not, so.
I thought it might be advantageous to discuss the second part.
No, I don't think so, Mr. Chairman. It requires you make a decision on this duplex. Therefore, the duplex is the case.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Maynard? We have a question from Ms. McKay.
Mr. Maynard, is this going to be a one on top of the other duplex? Is it going to be side by side? Where the driveway is, and how are they going to park?
Not particularly relevant, but I will answer your question.
Thank you.
Meaning I don't have to answer it because it's not relevant to your decision whether it's an up and down or side by side. But this will be a side by side.
Oh, no, just let me know for the driveways, that's why.
And where you see the duplex here, the driveway will come in here, and we'll have parking in the front.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? No questions? I don't have any other questions. You could have a seat,
All
and we'll
set,
see
Mr.
what we
Chairman.
find. Is there anybody else to speak in favor of this proposal? Favor of the proposal of 54 Bowers? Anyone with questions or concerns? Hi, if you'd like to come to the microphone and give us your name and address. Sure, if you'd like to come up the stairs there and hand those out.
Sorry. Didn't realize that was in the corner. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Scott Wozniakowski. I own the single-family residence abutting the proposed project. I do have some significant concerns to voice, but I want Mr. Maynard to explain what Phase 2 consists of.
Well, wait a minute. Testimony is directed at us. If you could walk us through your concerns.
Sure. I have owned the house for 3 years now, and it's a quiet area. I have a nice wooded backyard. That is part of the old rail bed. That's why this area is so unique, because the old rail bed came through there, and that's what dominates the property lines and why mine is at a triangle. During the course of my ownership, the proponent has come to me on several occasions over 3 years asking if he can buy a portion of my property to facilitate his project. When I bought my house, the owner at that time also said the proponent had asked her to buy a portion of her property to facilitate this project. We did not allow that because I do not want the development to take place. Mr. Kirian does not live on the property. This is a rental property to him. He's simply trying to build another apartment for additional revenue. Looking at the lot sizes, okay, the minimum lot size requirement is 6,970 square feet. He only has 5,072. That leaves a deficit of 1,900, or 27% less than what the minimum is. That's a gross underestimate, and I think it demonstrates that he's trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. The structure will be located in my backyard and very close to the property line, within basically 10 feet of the property line and probably 30 feet from my house. This will add additional shadowing because the sun sets to the west, and right now I have a view of the skyline. This house, if constructed, would create a great obstacle in the view and obstruct the skyline and sunset. Nevertheless, the added noise that would be occurring within feet of my house during the construction period, which who knows how long, how many months it would take. And the Crown Hill neighborhood is an old established neighborhood from the 40s or earlier. The structure that would be erected, if accepted by the board, would not replicate the architectural style and reflect the essential character of the neighborhood, as is said in the variance application in Section 3, Purpose of Request. My house stood still for a year before someone bought it, and that was me. The Crown Hill area is not really sought after people moving into Nashua to buy a home. And with this new structure within feet of my house is definitely a negative detractant when I go to put my house on the market. Therefore, I oppose this variance request.
Questions for Mr., is it Wozniakowski?
Wozniakowski, would you like me to spell?
I think that would be good because we'd probably get it wrong otherwise.
W-O-Z-N-I-A-K-O-W-S-K-I.
Thank you. 2 letters off. Mr. Boucher has a question for you.
So, just to understand, where you're coming from, I understand your concern with proximity to your, backyard or side yard back and property line. If for some way or reason that a proposed duplex or home was able to be pushed back 3 times the distance than proposed now, would that not change your mind, but would that kind of make you look at things a little bit differently?
I don't believe there's enough depth in the lot to accommodate that.
But I'm asking you, if he was able to add 3 times the distance, that's the minimum to the property line, within the building line, would you, again, I guess what I'm trying to get from you is where it is that your tolerance is, is it like, hey, this is just, even though it's within a building envelope, it's just way too close, but if that particular structure was able to be pushed back, and right now, obviously it isn't, but I'm trying to understand, if for some reason the structure can be pushed back further away, does that change your perspective on the situation?
No, it does not. As you can see from the picture that I handed out, there is good space between the homes, and I like it that way.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question. I think, I could be wrong, but I think that by right, in fact, I'll ask this to Mr. Falk. By right, could a single-family home be built on this lot? Yeah, okay.
Enough land area.
The reason I was asking is, we're here tonight with this case because it's a request for a duplex, and a duplex requires more square footage than a single-family home. The lot has enough square footage that a single-family home can be built by right, but not a duplex. So, I guess, I wanted to clarify that, to say by right, like, a pretty similar building could go up, I think in the exact same spot, just for the act of pulling a permit. And so what we're weighing tonight is that versus a duplex. And I didn't know if you were aware of that, or if that has any impact, to say that the board tonight could give us a thumbs up to this, or a thumbs down. A thumbs up, likely build a duplex, because that's what the request is. Thumbs down, my thought would be build a single-family home. I guess just wanted to point that out. I didn't know if you had, just wanted to make sure you recognize that
Well,
situation.
what is the minimum lot size for a single family?
5,000 square feet, and I guess, let me just look. Your property, I think, is in the RB zone, and I'm just gonna ask Mr. Falk, what is the side yard setback for, what would the building distance be by right, for a single-family home? That would, to me, it would be a split zone, but it would still be in the RB.
RC is the majority zone.
7. And what is it for RC?
Seven side.
For RB and RC? Okay, so for RB or RC, the side yard setback minimum is 7.
Same setbacks.
Same setbacks. So just, something that I'll be considering on this is, regardless of duplex or single, that is by right, a structure could be fairly close. I'm not saying that's weighing on my decision, I just wanted to make sure that that is clarified in my head, and if you had any reaction to that, that's fine. If not, that's fine also.
I do. I don't like a neighbor being that close to my backyard, to the deck where I am having,
Yeah,
relaxation.
I
You know,
hear you.
I understand the land exists, but it doesn't mean you have to cram every last, square foot on it.
Right, I hear you loud and clear on that. I appreciate your candid response.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Wozniakowski? I think we're all set for now. Thank you. Is there anybody else to? Yeah, if you want to leave it there, we'll keep that with us. Is there anybody else with questions or concerns about 50 Bauer Street? Nobody else, then Mr. Maynard, would you like to address the concerns we've just heard?
If folks look at the configurations here, piece of land we tried to buy, was a portion of this little triangle, so we'd have direct frontage on Biowa Street and where, in front of where the duplex would potentially, would have made it a better looking, nicer property, but that being the case, they wouldn't sell, so we're here with what we're proposing today. The neighbor's property is in the general industrial zone. It is not in the RB or the RC zone. The GI zone comes right down here, and he's in the GI zone. The front portion of his property is in the RB, but the majority of his property is in the GI, general industrial zone. This really is a mixed use zone, or zoning-wise, et cetera. The fact that somebody lives on the property or not is neither here nor there. I understand the board knows that. I'm just answering that question for him. We have an empty lot. My client would like to do something with it. It is my impression and our impression that the neighborhood is mostly duplexes. Mr. Wojciechowski's house is the only single family immediately in the neighborhood. Everything else is either commercial or very high density multifamily. Therefore, what we're trying to do is conform to the neighborhood. Now, I will go a little further and explain part two, because now it becomes relevant now that I hear the concerns of my abutter. The idea of part two, if the duplex is allowed, would be to reorient the duplex, and I think that Mr. Chairman realized that in some of his questions, but it would allow the duplex to be moved away from being right next to his property to a configuration that's further over here by, I forget that setback in there, but it's at least 20 feet as opposed to the 7, because that now becomes the rear yard. When if we reconfigure this lot and combine this lot, that becomes a rear yard. Therefore, we have a rear yard setback instead of a side yard setback. This part two would be a variance to allow 2 structures on 1 lot. In this particular way, the parking lot for the 4-unit at the corner is totally non-conforming. It encroaches over the lot line. It requires people to back out into the street to enter and exit. And it's a very poor practice to do that. Backing out into an active street is not recommended. So if we could, the part 2 variance is granted, assuming the duplexes would be allowed, we could reconfigure the lot, put it together, and then put a conforming parking lot right in the middle with 10 spaces in there, which was more than enough to accommodate the 4 units that exist there and the 2 units in the proposed duplex. So that is a vastly superior layout. Now, the reasons why we did part 1 and part 2, if I went straight forward with this without having the duplex allowed, because this building here is 4 units on a totally non-conforming lot size, the density would have been extreme, and you folks would have had negative thoughts about that particular case. But if you thought the duplex was a good idea in this vacant lot, then to me, moving the lot around and reconfiguring it so it lays out much better is a much better situation. It more conforms to good planning practices. It'll look more attractive, and it'll fit in the neighborhood much better. It'll take care of a pre-existing parking problem and make that conforming. So now that I understand that the neighbor is that concerned, I bring that up now, and we now have presented before you part 1 and part 2. So thank you for pushing me, Mr. Chairman.
questions for Mr. Maynard? I have a question. Could you just boil it down? In part one, what is the distance of the foundation to the lot line? And in part two?
It's a
what is
side
the
lot line, so it can be as close as what's allowed in that zone, which is 7 feet.
And what about your
And
Plan
on the
B?
part two, because it now becomes a rear yard, because of the way the lot is configured, and therefore it has to be 20 feet, I believe that's the requirement. So,
So you're saying that in your,
part two, it's
Part-
further away from the lot line,
it's 20 feet away?
yes. It-
Or-
It has to be at least 20 feet.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions? Ms. McKay?
Just so that I understand this, because it's a little confusing.
It is, it is.
And I'm a visual learner, so this is, you're gonna help me. What you wanna do with phase two is to reorient the property.
I want to put
The-
both lots together.
So you wanna put this
Therefore,
lot with,
together, it becomes more rectangular instead of these long, narrow lots, and therefore I can reconfigure where I locate buildings, because I have more square lots as opposed to long and narrow.
okay,
Simplistically, that's what we're trying to do.
so that you'll actually reorient that one particular building so that it's,
Yeah, the duplex ends up in a much
yeah.
better position, lot-wise and neighborly-wise.
And then you incorporate all of this so that you make 10 parking spaces instead of these couple, or these
These
that are
four, which are
existing.
non-conforming
Right.
and somewhat unsafe.
So
it's a better
actu-
situation parking, too.
And it's more aesthetically pleasing.
Yes, it'll definitely look much better.
Thank you. Now I understand. Thank you very much.
Actually, I have another, Mr. Boucher, go right ahead.
So again, not to beat a dead horse, and that was why I was getting to my question about the possibility of that, because I saw what you were gonna do. So I'm sure that you would agree, like you have, and with other of your clients, that when neighbors are concerned, that you would move that structure as furthest away possible within that building envelope, away from their property, right? So you would say this is how we would do that, right?
Yes, this is essentially, I think, about as far away as I can put it.
Right.
And still make it work.
Right, and I noticed that because you're right on the envelope building
One corner
line.
is right on the parking lot, so.
Right, right. And just to follow up, in case there's any concerns with parking, so I kind of counted 5 parking spots existing in that parking lot, kind of.
Yeah,
I don't know if they park on the dirt, but again, I just kind of will say that it appears that you're going to be providing more parking than what's required.
Two things. One, that parking's not legal because it encroaches over the lot line. It's not on the same lot as the 4-unit building. It straddles the lot line, so
Right.
it's not, it's been allowed to exist because nobody wanted to enforce anything, but if the lot for which the duplex is on ever got sold, that parking lot is probably gone, and we end up with no parking.
Right.
Because of that encroachment. So, the ordinance, I think it says, now says 1.5 spaces per unit, which, and I'll tell you honestly, the planning board waives all the time, because you either have make your parking work, or your whatever you're proposing is not gonna work in the long run anyway, so, but anyway, 1.5 spaces per unit, where we don't have anything near to that, is more than adequate for parking in this type of particular neighborhood, where many of the places don't have any parking at all, and they have to have off-site parking, they have to walk or whatever. It's not unusual. This is on the edge of the city. This is a city, almost a city zone, and we have a major employer of the hospital. There's a ton of people that walk to the hospital to work, so.
So in general, you have met the parking requirements with the
Have
1.5.
met the parking requirements.
Right.
And the subsequent lot, if you grant the variances, will be totally conforming with the variances.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Vitale?
And you're gonna move that curb cut? with-
Yes.
If this
Yeah,
would be
because it's way over
approved?
here, and that's not the proper place for it to go in. and it's a little
Way
bit
down.
site restricted because the building is right on top of the sidewalk. So,
I'm sorry, I missed
That's all
that,
right.
or I wouldn't have even asked. And, just by chance, you putting in one garage with each of those duplexes?
No,
Okay.
that's why we have parking spaces.
No, I just wanted to ask.
We don't do
Okay.
garages in Crown Hill too often.
Any other questions? I have a question. Did I have it right in the assessment that in your Plan A, or Phase 1, Part 1, Mr. Quirin has the right to build a structure now,
Correct.
a single-family structure?
Definitely a single family, he could build, in this zone, I think he could build large garages also, which may end up being for storage and warehouses. There's a lot of things you can do, which ends up with a structure the same size as a duplex, in this, roughly the same location. So, yes, we can do a single family, but there's all kinds of other things that come
Right.
close to what the duplex building size would be, which is one of his principal objections. He didn't want a large
Well, I
duplex
mean, I
next
asked that
door.
because basically by right, something's
by
going
right.
in there.
Yes,
Right?
oh,
And
for sure, by right.
By right, and,
With no special permits, no nothing,
right,
just
just go down to City Hall and
just
pull a
could
permit.
pull your building permit and go.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you for clarifying that for me. Any other questions?
No.
All right, you could have a seat.
Thank you.
Mr. Wozmiakowski, would you like to, have you seen the Plan B? Would you like to come to the microphone, and you have the right to speak, and I'm curious about your thought of the Plan B versus the Plan A. Because your opinion's
Well-
important to me, and I think to all of us.
Thank you, I appreciate that. You know, the lesser of two evils would be the single family, naturally. Minimum square requirements would be like in the area of 5,000 square feet. The duplex is just way too big for the lot size that he has. Like I mentioned, it's 27% greater than the lot that he has. So I don't like that option at all. I'm very familiar with the lot, the parking. I'm very familiar with the way they pull the parking in right now, the 5 lots. If they're going to add more spaces, I don't know how that's going to work effectively. Nonetheless, I still do not support the variance.
All right, any thoughts, questions? Okay. I guess I just had one question. If there was a single-family home built, with the 7 feet distance versus a duplex further away, just curious, you mentioned about your deck and the proximity was important to you. Would that further away duplex feel would be better, or the closer by right single, or too hard to tell?
I
Just
think it's
curious.
too hard to tell without actually knowing what the footprint would be by walking the site.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. Mr. Boucher?
So refresh my memory, what's the buffer between yourself and that lot line? What's there now?
Just some shrubs.
Just shrubs. Okay, so, not that the applicant would agree, if there was an opportunity to provide some fencing along a part of the line that affects you, would that help your situation?
Well, I have a fence there already, and
Right.
that is what makes the property line, is the fence. It's a waist-high fence.
Right.
I don't know if it's going to be if it's a 1-story or 2-story. My main concern is how it's going to obstruct the skyline and cast shadows.
Right. Okay. Understood. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I think we're all set. You could have a seat, and I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. And anybody want to jump in first? If not, I will. Well, I think Mr. Wozmiakowski, has, well, let me get back to the zoning first. Mr. Maynard makes the argument, this is, RCRB with the abutting home in the GI. I look at it more like there's a long-time single-family home, and even to the right of that is another single-family home, so I respect that. And so in the Part A, I struggle to find support for that because the lot's big enough to support a single-family home by right. It's a tight lot, it's an odd-shaped lot, but that doesn't work to me as a special condition to permit a duplex. So for the Part A, or Part 1, I'm sorry, I'm struggling to find support for that. For the Part B, I guess I'm stuck because the Part B has a structure further away, but it'll be a little bit bigger. But it's actually a fair amount further away. Instead of likely 7 feet, it's gonna be at least 20 feet away. And I agree with Mr. Maynard, if we're just looking at Part 1 and Part 2, I think Part 2 is a better design for the whole situation. But I'm struggling with, I don't find support for Part 1, and I'm looking for some opinions on whether Part 2 is less of an incursion to the residents next door or not. I'm stuck on that. So, Ms. Vitale, would you like to?
I think I'd have to agree with you there if we're just looking at Part 1. I don't think I could support a duplex, and I would be looking at it staying within the 5,000 square feet and have a single-family home, but that would be a side yard of 7 feet. They could go and build it tomorrow. They have space right out onto Bauer Street that's being used by the other building currently because of that. But nothing guarantees that that building will be a different size than a duplex. You could build a single-family house that's a couple, that's 2 stories that fits the building envelope and et cetera, and it would be by right, and it would be 7 feet, be that 7 feet off the property line. So that would be where I would look that it might be beneficial to have the duplex and merge the 2 lots. You correct a parking issue that, that curb cut for that existing 4-unit, it's right next to the building. That's where it is, but can we prove it together, and do it as an entire thing? Do we have to do one and then the other? I'd rather see a single family and do the 2 lots together.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
I can see, where, there would be difficulty in a duplex on the Phase 1. Certainly, no issues with a single-family home. So, couple of things here, right? So it's what do you get, or what could happen in either situation? Testimony is that not only can there be a single-family home put there, but there could be some other uses put there. Okay, so what would that bring? What kind of, what kind of activity would that bring? And would that activity be less impactful or more impactful than a single-family home or a duplex? Okay, but again, we know that a single-family home can be built there, pulling permits tomorrow at City Hall. So the abutter has concerns with the skyline, and what exists now is there's nothing there. So let's just say that permits are pulled for a single-family home. The builder, the owner, has every right to put that within the building envelope, and it could be right up to that 7-foot side setback, and puts up a legal height structure, which I'm sure Mr. Falk could tell us how high that could be, and that structure goes up, no problem. So if we look at now merging both lots and putting a duplex in, because this is what the applicant is here asking for, and now that duplex is pushed back, and so either we have a single-family home that potentially, or is 7 feet on the property line, and it's in a proposed location, or a duplex that's pushed back 20 feet. I think in either case, there will be skyline obstruction, but would it be less impactful with a duplex there because it's further back? Again, it's perception, but I'm sure the math could be done. But again, I'm thinking that it's a personal opinion. If I had a choice, I don't live there, but if I had a choice and it was either or, because I know they could put single family, I would maybe tend to say, hey, let's put the duplex and push it back, get it further away from me. So with that being said, I would be more inclined to look at it as that it's important to me that being in favor of the duplex is really that we're approving phase 2. I can't see it separated. Now, one of the things that happens here is that there is a benefit, obviously a huge benefit that happens in the merger of both lots, is that not only are we correcting a situation with lot ownership with parking crossing over another lot, but we're creating a better situation for the driveway and the traffic flow, and the safety on that street. So there is some benefit to the public for going with a merged lot duplex. There is an additional benefit. So again, we know that we can put a single-family home there with no problem, put a driveway there, there's no issue. So, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that, the level of burden to say, hey, duplex has got to go on that lot, just that phase 1 lot, it's a little tough for me, but I can definitely see support to do it on the merged lot, because now it entails other factors that, to me, are beneficial to the neighborhood. This is notwithstanding the concerns that the abutter has, because, again, I know from testimony, and I know that no matter what, something's going to be built there. It's just a matter of what is going to be built there.
Thank you. Ms. McKay?
Okay. I concur with everyone's comments. However, I look at this and I try and figure out, okay, if it's a single-family home, where am I coming in to put the driveway? If I orient my house so that it's 7 feet from the side setback, then how, I have to come around the other property owners, and I don't know who owns this property, if it's Mr. Kirian, then he can, of course, utilize his own property to get in. But it seems to me that whether it was a single family or a duplex, the orientation would be better if it was placed the way it is in Phase 2. And again, like everyone else, Phase 2 is the better orientation, the better plan, the better idea. A single-family home would be much aesthetically more pleasing because it obviously wouldn't take over as much landmass as a two-family. But as Mr. Maynard stated, garages could go in there, storage could go in there, anything could go in there without needing anything more than pulling a permit. So it's pretty much a conundrum. Not real fan of a two-family, but I am a fan of the orientation and the consideration and the application in Phase 2. So there you go.
Let me summarize what I think I've heard. I think nobody's finding support for the Phase 1, which is the duplex in the orientation on the one lot 66. But I guess so that's what I hear universally. 4 of us are feeling that way. After hearing your opinions, what's clarifying in my mind is I think the distance from the lot line or increasing the distance goes a long way to better privacy, less noise. In other words, if I was confronted with a decision of would I want a single family 7 feet from the lot line or a duplex 20 feet, I'm feeling that the 20 feet is a much better situation for the abutter. That's certainly what I would want. So I'm
Duplex is also a permitted use.
well, thank you for clarifying that a duplex is a permitted use in the RB and RC. So I guess I'm feeling like, I think we're also hearing at this point for folks who are okay with the Phase 2 design. I guess one thing you said, Mr. Boucher, I think a fence is a reasonable consideration because right now in the front lot, it's a yard, and there's it's going to be more activity over it. I think that would be a reasonable stipulation. I don't know about how anyone else feels about that.
Before we would even decide that, and again, I just wanted to make sure that I heard right. We talked about that, but I'm not sure if the butter said there was a fence. Again, he said there was shrubbery. I don't know if there was a fence. And again, I just want to make sure before if we were to go down that road, that we're not, we're not going to force something on another neighbor, but certainly we could do that, and it's the applicant that would put it on their own property line, right? So,
Yeah.
so I guess it really doesn't matter what's there now, right? So, I guess now it's not really about, the applicant. It's really about saying whether or not we feel that that's important enough, no matter what exists currently.
Yeah.
To, I guess, a line of fencing would certainly enhance the whole property, right?
Yes, I think it would. I thought what was there was some shrubs and a waist-high fence.
Right,
That's
and
what I
and
thought
I
I
saw
heard.
that, but I was trying to remember if I missed a section that was larger or if it was on another end, so, right.
I didn't remember. I didn't
Yeah.
specifically look at a fence when I was there. I don't, so it's unclear what's there to me.
So I would be in support of that. Excuse me, Mr. Paul.
I think the direction the board, the discussion is leading towards not supporting a two-family on the first case. By supporting the two-family, on the first case, it would allow for this configuration with the two-family right next to the row of parking that's pretty much right at one with the building. So you might want to think about how that would look with a single family next to a parking area of 10 parking spaces right next to it. I don't know if you want to see a revised plan showing where a single-family house would go. Because, I mean, personally, I wouldn't want to have a single-family house next to 10 parking spaces. A two-family is more of a accepted form of development to have a parking field next to it. Most single-family homes have just a driveway and a garage. This is going to be a single-family next to, pretty much at one with 10 parking spaces.
My take on it was
think you
that
might
we
wanna-
were favorable to a two-family in the Phase 2 orientation. That's-
Yeah, I don't even think I was looking at it as a single family with 10 parking spaces. I'm thinking that 10 parking spaces only exist in Phase 2.
Yeah.
Does not exist in Phase 1, and as the applicant stated, that could be there could be a problem there, because irregardless of what's allowed on that lot, there may be an issue with the existing structure on the corner and their parking, right? That could, because they have to cross over another piece of property, right?
May I clarify our application, please?
No, right now, we're in public meeting, and we're going
You
to
can
keep it
yield.
that way.
Any member can ask for yield.
What's that?
Any member can ask the chair to yield to the applicant under the rules of order.
Is the board inclined to suspend the public hearing and reopen the public meeting?
So, I will make the motion to clarify maybe the understanding of exactly the difference between the two phases, and I think it's to what Mr. Falk was coming at.
Because,
And
correct me if I'm wrong, I think I'm hearing the board is more supportive of Phase 2, but not of Phase 1. But Phase 2 can only happen if Phase 1 happens.
Okay, so,
Am I correct?
Single
So-
family is not a consideration.
So I
It's a
don't,
duplex or not. If
they
you don't
have to
approve the
have-
duplex, Phase
So-
2 doesn't happen.
so,
I think they want 1 and 2. It can't be one or the other. I
so-
think they want the both.
so maybe you can help me out. Why I said single family, and I hope there's no misunderstanding, is that in my mind, that's what could go there, and I know that that's not what's in front of us. It was kind of a justification on how we are looking at this project here, this proposal. So how do we get past, maybe Mr. Park can help me with this, how do I get past in my mind, you're saying that we have to approve Phase 1 to get to Phase 2, and so this is what I'm afraid of. So can we put a stipulation in a motion that if we approve Phase 1 and Phase 2 is not approved, then, see, we can't go backwards, right? So this is my fear is that we approve Phase 1, and then, for whatever reason, and anybody can make, we're all here as individuals, right, volunteering, somebody may decide that, I'm changed my mind, let's just say, right, and that's okay, that's our right, and I'm not forcing anybody, and we change our mind. Now, what I'm afraid of is that we're stuck with Phase 1 that I don't want, but I'm looking to say, hey, I'm okay with Phase 2, but now we're stuck with Phase 1. Now we have an approved lot with a duplex, approved duplex. You follow what I'm saying? How does,
But
how?
the thing is with that parking area that's existing right now on the abutting property line, that, they can't have any of that.
I understand that,
All the access to that goes through this lot.
right, so,
They
but
lose all their
could,
parking.
let me ask you this. Could, yeah, and again, I don't want to belabor this, but could, at one point, the owner of Phase 1 grant access to the building owner of Phase 2 to cross his property so his tenants can park? So if only Phase 1 went through, and the Phase 1 owner says, hey, Phase 2 owner, I'm gonna grant you access over my property to park there, right? nothing stops them from doing that, right?
It's up to the property owners.
That's what I'm saying. So,
It's a
again.
burden on them to do
right.
that, though. I mean,
And I think we all want to get to the same spot, but I want to make sure that we're not going to get,
And wouldn't they then have to actually grant an easement? Because if somebody else.
Right, and
If they
again-
sold the property, that's just word of mouth.
right, so again, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but you're absolutely right. But, so, let's bring it back down, right? Back to where we want to go. So what you're saying is that we have to approve phase one before we can approve phase two.
Because we're also looking at density issues too.
I understand that, yeah. So,
I think, just to simplify, you want to really look at what the overall plan is, what the overall ending picture would be. What's the best way to get to the overall picture of what they want, which is a better parking situation. And I'm not an advocate for or against this plan. I'm just trying to make a little bit of discussion here. I have no stake in this in any way, shape, or form. From a planning perspective, I mean, we would argue that the parking field that's proposed in phase two is a much better situation with both lots combined. I think that's a given. The duplex, you know, there's also some setback and some site issues with it being placed further back on the lot versus just on phase one. If it's just on phase one, it's really close to Bower Street and to the neighbor's property. By phase two, it's a little bit further back from both Bower Street and the neighbor's property. So the setbacks and the overall space from the street is improved, the parking is improved, the access is improved. I mean, that's the way our staff sees it.
So I have a
So,
question. I have a question. Can you make a motion to approve phase one contingent upon phase two being developed and implemented?
Well, they have to do it.
Yeah. I just want to jump in, and
They-
I have the
they
same,
have to do that.
I have the same concern Mr. Boucher does, is that nobody wants Plan 1, and we don't want to leave the door open for that inadvertently to get back there. I think the best way to cover that is just what you had said, is a stipulation.
Yeah.
We could approve them both, but with the stipulation that the duplex would be situated for the Plan 2 only, so that it could never be built close to the, you know, within the other, so it couldn't be built within 20 feet of the property line, which is where we all want to be.
okay, great.
So if we're good with that, I'll make a motion now to cover those bases.
Phase one approval is contingent, based upon phase two development and implementation, correct?
Let me hazard a motion.
Mr. Falk, are you all set? You looked, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Are you good with that?
Well, I mean, it's not my plan, so as long as the applicant, if this is what the applicant has applied for and what they're really requesting, I mean, that's, you know, the question is really more towards them. I'm just trying to make sure you guys understand exactly.
So,
This is not an easy one. This is something that you probably have never seen before. I don't think I've ever seen it before in my 20 years here at all, and I don't think Mr. Maynard has either. So this is a very unique situation, but I just want to make sure that the board understands exactly what would be approved if you go with both of these together, which would be this plan here.
Mr.
And that's
Currier,
combining both of lots together,
Right,
two
right.
principal structures on that same lot.
maybe to simplify this, maybe because the four of us are here, maybe it's, maybe it's ahead of, you know, putting the cart in front of the horse, but if we kind of talk about it and just kind of say that where we're at, and if we have a consensus that we're gonna move forward to phase two and approve it, then I think we'd be safe approving phase one, if that's the case, knowing that we're gonna approve phase two, which now makes phase one a moot point, right?
I think a motion approving phase 1 and phase 2 with the stipulation that only the phase 2 plan would be where the structure is located, would get to the same endpoint.
I agree.
Okay,
And
all right,
the applicant was giving me the thumbs up when
Okay,
I asked
all right.
my question, so.
okay,
So,
all right, all right, go ahead.
okay,
You're gonna
ready
be,
for a motion?
yeah, absolutely.
All right. I'm going to make a motion on behalf of the owner Jill's Quirin at land and 50 Bowers Street. I'm making a motion to approve the minimum lot area of 6,970 square feet and required where 5,072 square feet is existing to construct a two-family structure on lot 66, and to allow two principal structures on one consolidated lot, lots 18 and 66. I make that motion right away with the stipulation that the motion is the stipulation is that the structure will be situated per the Phase 2 design. So the two-unit structure, again, would be situated per the Phase 2 design, which is 20 feet from the lot line. And I believe that with that stipulation, that allows the variance to enable its proposed use of the property, which is rearranging the parking and merging two lots. And also the proposed duplex would be further from the abutter on the right. And with that situation, I believe that the design or this variance is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. I think the board finds it'll not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels because I think the board finds it is more advantageous to have a duplex located further away from the abutting property than by right a single-family home closer to the abutting property. And I think it's not contrary to public interest and substantial justice would be served. So again, I make that motion with the stipulation that only the structure would be located per the Phase 2 design. Seconded by Mr. Boucher, I think was up first.
Mrs. Vitale had it first.
Ms. Vitale, seconded. Discussion on the motion.
Did you want to throw in about anything about a fence?
I forgot all about that. I'm inclined to stipulate that a privacy fence would be erected by the applicant on the property line to the abutter, whose address is, I didn't have the address, but it's the abutting property on the right. 58 Bowers. So I add the stipulation of a privacy fence to be added to 58, between this property and 58 Bowers.
Second that, yeah.
Yep, I second that also.
That's seconded. Any discussion on that revised motion? No discussion. A show of hands in favor of that motion. So that motion is approved for the Phase 2 design, essentially. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 3.
Thank you.
Are we good to go? Keep going?
Just a minute, let me
Okay.
put all these papers where they need to go.
We have this for the record? Yeah. Okay, because that's the same one that's up there. All right, I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 4. The owner is Milky Caraballo Cuevas. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The address is 80 and 82 and a half Lock Street. The request is a use variance to operate a barber shop in a portion of an existing building. Hi, good evening. Could you give us your name and address for the record and walk us through your application?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Milky Carvalho. I'm the owner of 82 and 82 and a half Lock Street, which is there's downstairs. There's a pre-existing business location, and that was the whole purpose of me buying the building. And then noticed there's businesses around the same area on 82 on Lock Street, as well as Chandler Street. There's a laundromat, and there's a dentist office. And would like to continue doing business. I'm the owner of Milky's Barbershop in Hudson, New Hampshire, and I've been able to provide for jobs for people, apprentice, barbers. I was once the manager at Bias Barbershop before. Then I opened my business here on Main Street. Then the person that owned the building said that she needed to sell the building or something, and then I ended up in Hudson, and I will want to go through the same thing again. I mean, it's difficult to find barbers, so I've been apprenticing barbers, and another thing is like, it's difficult, like sometimes I'm in a threat line to the owner of the place, just saying he doesn't want me there no more, he want to sell the place or other reasons. So I would like to get a variance for that location. When it comes to like parking, there's parking in the place. The way I operate business is I mostly work by appointments, so it's like it's not crowded so much. So that's the way I operate business, and that's pretty much it.
All right, any questions for Mr. Carabello? I guess I have a question, I guess actually for Mr. Falk. This looks like a business, and I think it was a business there. Could you give us the history of that?
There was a long-standing TV repair shop there. I think it's Armand's TV Repair.
Yeah.
It was there for quite some time, and so there has been a long history of mixed use in the building. And you can see by the look of the building, there has been a business there on the bottom. But I believe the TV repair shop had been closed down for a while, so in a residential zone such as this, a non-conforming use can change to another non-conforming use as long as it's substantially similar. It's also been within a year. This one has been longer than a year, and the TV repair shop is not the same as the barber shop. They're two different types of uses in our code. So that's why, he's here for this variance.
Okay.
There has been some history of commercial uses of the building. We have our building file backs that up, so.
Okay, so it's not really a question, it was just, just wanted to clarify that what we need to find for a variance is a hardship, and one of the elements on this property is it's essentially been a business, it looks like a business, and it's been a business for many years, prior to your occupancy of it. So I certainly appreciate the difficulties I guess you have with getting barbers and stuff. But for the hardship on the land, I'm seeing a hardship in the sense that it's been a business for quite some time and set up as a business, and so someone like you comes along thinking, hey, this is good for me, and I'd like to operate my barber shop here, and just wanted to have that on the record. Are there any other questions for? I think we're all set. You could have a seat. We'll see what else other people think. Is there anybody else to speak in favor of this proposed barber shop at 80 and 82 Lock Street? Anybody with questions or concerns? No questions or concerns? All right, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts? Mr. Boucher?
I actually use Diamond's TV show.
Oh, really?
Or whatever, oh, yeah. I remember that, when I saw this, I'm going, oh my God, and I remember him too, the owner of the shop. And it was very eclectic in there, there was a lot going on in that place. I'm in support of the application. I think that the location's good. I know it's a busy intersection, but again, he's not telling us that, there's gonna be 12 barbers there and, this is an all, a 24-hour operation. I think because it was a pre-existing business there, and I know it's been a while, but I think it's an established storefront, and I think it's something that actually will be good for the neighborhood. So I really don't have anything that says, that I would find any opposition to it.
All right.
So I'd be in support of it.
Thank you. Ms. Vitale?
Yeah, I agree. I'm in support of the application, and I think per the application, I saw that he's looking to have like 3 people working at one time in like 2 shifts, so a total of 6, but 3 at one time. So I think that's well within the scope of the amount of parking and everything that is available.
Ms. McKay?
I concur. I think that it may have less people coming and going because you are there by appointment only, and it is business, and he's going to employ people. I see no reason to say no. I support it.
I'm in support also, really for the reasons that you've all stated. I think having a viable business there, I mean, there is, it's a residential zone, but there's been a business there for many years, and I don't think there's any negative impact to the neighborhood to continue a business there, albeit a barber shop instead of a TV repair. And to have a viable business in the neighborhood, I think, is good for the surrounding area. Would anybody like to hazard a motion? Mr. Boucher?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the use variance from Milky V. Carbello Cuevas, and I apologize for the pronunciation. The address is 82 to 82 and a half Lock Street, requesting a use variance to operate a barber shop in a portion of an existing building. The zone is an RC zone. Code section is 190-15, table 15-1, number 35. We find that the zoning restriction as applied interferes with the landowner's reasonable use of the property, considering the unique setting of the property and its environment. We spoke the fact that there is an existing storefront in this location. There is no fair and substantial relationship that exists between the general purposes of the zoning ordinance and the specific restriction on the property, and that a variance would not injure the public or private rights of others. We find that it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. It is not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. So I make a motion to approve the use variance.
Seconded by Ms. McKay. Any discussion on Mr. Boucher's motion? No discussion. A show of hands in favor of the motion. So your motion is approved, and good luck with the business. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 4. Are we good to keep going?
Yes, I think so.
All right, I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 5. The owner is 270 Amherst Street LLC. The applicant is Pet Supplies Plus. The request is a variance to exceed maximum wall sign area, 90 square feet permitted, 180 square feet proposed. Hi, good evening. Would you like to give us your name and address and walk us through your application?
Carolyn Parker, 3 Lorraine Avenue, Worcester, Massachusetts, 01606.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. I'm here tonight representing Pet Supplies Plus. They're out of Detroit, Michigan. Here with me tonight is Kara Jumo, who is from the corporate office, if you have any questions for her. Basically, we're asking for a variance to put a sign that is larger than allowed per the bylaws, wall sign. This is a new strip mall going in. There are a few properties already in there. I believe there's a Domino's in there. There's a Aldo supermarket in there. The building is set back approximately 450 feet from the roadway. Our frontage is 60 feet, but our building the depth of our building is 133 feet. So we're skinny and long. So that reduces the amount of square footage that we're allowed for a wall sign. We're allowed 1.5 times, which would give us 90 square feet. We're asking to put 48-inch high letters, which, when a building is 450 feet from the roadway, that is actually, the perfect height that they should be. This would ask us to have a sign that's 186.6 square feet. Do you want me to read my criteria and my reasons why I should be approved?
We have that on record, and I'm sure we've all read it.
They're new to the, there's only one other Pet Supplies Plus. They're new to the area. There's only one other one located in Bedford, New Hampshire. So they're new to the area. They want people to know where they are. When they're coming in, there's 9 businesses in the strip mall. They want to be able to have people know exactly where they're going within the parking lot, because it's a large parking lot. Therefore, the distance from the road, the height of the letters is what we're looking to get.
All right, let's see where we're at. Any questions for Ms. Parker? Ms. Vitale?
Is there gonna be a sign out on the street too?
There is a freestanding sign out on the road, but the largest, it's got the 9 tenants in it, so it's not a very large sign.
On the side entrance also?
Yes,
So both entrances have,
yes.
Any other questions? I guess I have a question. I always like my colleagues to go first.
Yeah.
When I look at the site, I guess my initial reaction is that the requested sign on the wall front is rather large. There's been a history with strip malls where individual tenants come and go, and individual tenants, ask for overages. And when I pull into your site, I'm facing your store. And so I'm struggling to find the need for the overage of signage, because when I'm going down Amherst Street, I'm feeling that front sign, and that was presented to us some time ago, that front pylon sign was gonna be the gateway to the plaza. And Aldi is there, seems to be doing well. I didn't know those other two businesses had gone in,
I saw
until
a sign when I went
visited.
by today.
What's that?
Basically, Aldi is 4 letters. Pet Supplies Plus is 15 letters. So therefore, you're already a longer sign. So to make the sign longer, the height gets higher.
Okay,
I mean, the
guess-
Aldi sign, you got a bigger storefront, so you're getting more square footage, but it's a square sign. It's only 4 letters wide. I don't know the exact size of it.
Well,
But we're the next biggest store to Aldi, and then all the other ones are probably 30-foot, wide.
Well, I guess that's just my thought at the moment. I don't know, does anybody else have any questions or thoughts on it? If not, I guess, Ms. Vitale?
yeah, we're not in discussion yet, but that was my first thought also, is that it's a little bit big for what,
We do have a
Me
42-inch
too.
high instead of 48, which we'd still need a variance on. Would you like me to show you that one?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my executive, what I do.
I guess I had one other question. I appreciate this. A difficulty I had, I mentioned when there's a strip mall, is we're confronted with,
God bless you.
what I prefer is a plan for the whole mall. In other words, instead of various applicants coming at us each asking for variances, and then you get a hodgepodge, I prefer one plan that, is balanced and works for the whole site, and
Well, that would have taken place during the planning board stage, right? Sometimes they have a sign plan when you're doing one of those outside malls or whatever, you know what I mean? They have a sign thing that you have to have a certain amount. So I don't know if that was done here. Carter?
I don't think so. I mean, the planning board, they won't approve signs anyway. They don't, that's only through our staff and the zoning board.
I did speak with the owner and asked him if anybody else came and asked for a variance, and he said, no, they didn't. So we're here because we're the second largest store there. So the other people will be able to fit their sign within their square footage. But and like I say, we're 15 letters long. Domino's is 7. So, I mean, there's a lot more to it.
all right.
We would like to be approved at least for the 42-inch high. as I said, we're very far from the road. Even though you know you get in there, you still have to find your way through the parking lot to get to the, correct thing.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Parker? Okay. I think we're all set, Ms. Parker.
Would you like to
actually-
hear anything from Kara?
Sure, because the next up is anybody else who'd like to speak in favor, and I think that would, and I think I see at least one person in the audience who'd like to speak in favor. So again, if you could give us your name and address for the record and
My
let us know
name's-
what's on your mind.
Yep, my name's Kara Jumo. I'm from Detroit, but the address that I'm representing is 270 Amherst Street.
And could I trouble you to spell your last
Yeah,
name?
well, first name is Kara, last name's Giummo.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'm here representing Pet Supplies Plus. This is our second store in New Hampshire. We are going into an 8,000 square foot space. We're asking for some additional square footage for the signage, so our neighbors will be able to find us within the parking lot. We will have 2 pylon signs. However, as Carolyn mentioned, they are small on the roadside signs. This isn't. We're willing to reduce it to the 42-inch sign as stated, because the 48 does look large on the facade. Are there any questions for me?
Questions for Ms. Jumeau? Mr. Boucher?
It's really not maybe material, but I'm just curious if you're from corporate, and we see this a lot with automotive dealerships where corporate actually dictates signage and sizes. Does Pet Supplies Plus have a corporate standard that they are going, when they open a store, is it 48 inches they're trying to look for, or is it kind of what the site is and what it does?
A 48 is our standard if it's allowed within code, and if it's not, we typically go for a variance for it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Nope.
I think we're all set.
Thanks.
Have a seat. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of the sign? Anybody with questions or concerns, opposition? No opposition, so close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts? Mr. Boucher?
So, we have 2 things in front of us. We have the original application as written, with the 48-inch letters, and I do agree. I do find it a little large in scale, and that's probably as testified because of the number of letters. I think if it was a 4, 5, or 8 letter word, it may not be as bad. But I do have to admit that with the second presentation of the 42-inch size letters, which, for those who are listening, watching, the applicant has every right to ask for something of lesser incursion than what was applied for. So that is fine. So I think it's a lot about, when we look at something like this, it's a lot about the scale of the project and where we're going. And again, special conditions of the property is that this is off the road, a fair distance. So I guess looking at the scale on the facade, and we have a rendering here of what it is. It seems like the 42-inch fits in better in scale, and I would, tend to favor the application. I know that we have a lot of discussions with Danny Webster Highway and Amber Street when it comes to signage, and I think we all struggle with it. But again, I think, though it's more than what's allowed, I think it really brings it down to a more reasonable, whatever it is, I'm sure, I don't know if Mr. Corey did the calculation, but it's more like, instead of 200%, it's 155 or something like that, 150%, a little over that. So it's not, outrageous, but I'm saying that I think that the scale fits better on the facade. I think it gets less incursion for us, less of a square footage for us, and gets the applicant, you know, a little bit, you know, more of what they're looking for a storefront that's off the road. So, unless I'm convinced otherwise, I guess I would be leaning towards, you know, probably that maybe this is a better plan, and it would be okay with me. As far as, because, again, storefront's not on the road, it's really pushed back, and the pylon signs are, you know, there is on the two entrances, and I heard that testimony, we all heard the same thing. That was supposed to be the gateway into the plaza. But as you know, we all know, when there's different tenants going in, and at the time, I don't think they knew which tenants would be going in. I don't think, our wish would be great, right, to get that plan all the front, but, you know, we struggle with this all the time. So that's where I sit right now.
Ms. Vitale?
I'm definitely much more in favor of the 42-inch versus the larger proposal. And I too wish we could get everything together. It would look so much better in the end, my belief. And this is only facing Amherst Street. So quite a majority of the people that go into this plaza are coming in off of Sharon Avenue versus Amherst Street. And so those entryway signs that they're already putting up, that is going to be the signs that a lot of people are gonna be using, and not to look at the storefront. The way that plaza sits back there, and I'm right across the street, you're gonna be looking at the entryway signs and not the building, because of the way it sits back past Pep Boys there. So there's buildings on each side of that property that, unless you look at those moments, you're already gonna be at the light. So it's the sign at the entrance. That's the important one in my mind, in the way I use it. And I know a lot of my coworkers and everybody uses it. So definitely the smaller letters.
Ms. McKay?
I agree, the 42-inch is much more pleasing to the eye. You have what appears to be much more open space, so it looks much more aesthetically pleasing, it's more centered. And you're right, the way you would see this is probably in Dunkin' Donuts parking lot as you're waiting to get your car around that turn. You're gonna see the sign, but I can't see a reason to say no. I too would love if there was consistency when everybody had the same size, but in this plaza, the buildings are all so different that may be difficult to do, but I do like the 42-inch. Yeah, and Mrs. Vitale's right, you're gonna see the signs coming up the street, from the street right up on Amherst Street, because if you are in Dunkin' Donuts looking at this, it's too late, you're in the wrong direction. So, yeah.
All right, thanks. My thoughts, I still feel that, you know, the sign on the building could meet our code and be okay when you're in the lot. I don't want to belabor the point. I just wondering if somebody would like to hazard a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Boucher?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance for 270 Amherst Street LLC. The applicant is Pet Supplies Plus, address is 270 Amherst Street. They are requesting a variance to exceed maximum wall sign area of 90 square feet, permitted 180 square feet proposed. Zoning is the HB zone 190-108, section C, subpart 2. Mr. Currier, can you help me a little bit?
Well, I think it would be
Into-
safe to say that instead of the 48, what's being, the motion is for a 42-inch high letters. My calculator says that's about 163 square feet,
163.
approximately.
This is 142 to 41. Yeah.
142.
Oh, it does? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. So my calculations, did I just go with that?
So, right, so the original application was for for an 186 square foot proposed, but the applicant has reduced that request to 142.41 square feet.
Yes.
Which equates to, instead of 48-inch high letters, it's going to be 42-inch high letters.
Yeah, and actually by 40 feet wide. So that's what I missed. It's
Okay.
getting lower in this way.
Okay,
So I would just go with the 142 point.
41 square feet.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's clear now.
Yeah.
Okay. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, and the benefits sought by applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue, other than an area variance. We discussed the fact that the building is a new strip mall set further back from the road, and the applicant is looking for some visibility, and the storefront is a narrow storefront, but a deep storefront. So that is the special condition that we have talked about in this property. It is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. It is not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice would be served, so I make a motion to approve the variance.
Seconded by Ms. McKay. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion, a show of hands in favor. That's 3, opposed is myself. That's enough to carry, so your variance for 42 inches is approved, and we wish you good luck with your new business. All right, I'd like to close the public meeting on case number 5. Are we good to keep going, or are we, all right? I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 6. Case number 6, I'll read into the record. The owner is Raymond and Nancy Pinot. 54 Caldwell Street is the address. The request is a variance to exceed maximum accessory use area. 40% is allowed, 132% is proposed to construct a 28-foot round swimming pool with a 16-foot by 18-foot deck in the R9 zone. Hi, good evening. If you could give us your name and address. Welcome.
My name is Raymond Pino. I live at 54 Caldwell with my wife Nancy. In years past, we had a pool, same size, and a deck as well. And I have 2 pictures here to show. Sorry, I don't have 6 of them. But
That's all right. You could just, Mr. Boucher will grab it and we'll
Okay.
just pass it around.
in 2010, we had a pool, as you can see illustrated in the picture there. I want to say it was either 2011 or 2012. The pool was there when we bought it, had ruptured and flew apart, and we got rid of it. In the other picture, you see we put a garden in that area. My wife wants to put the pool back up because she feels that she wants to be able to go outside and utilize the yard. She's tired of being cooped up in the summertime in the house in the AC. She enjoyed having the pool at the time. She wants to have it back. I've talked to my neighbors, to my left, to my right, and behind. There are no complaints about it. As you can tell, they're not here tonight to fight about it. The only other thing is, the reason why I exceeded is because the structure that you see to the left is, was the old pool house, and we put a shed, like my son, who lived with us, had a motorcycle. He wanted to park his motorcycle inside, like a garage shed area. He has since moved out, and now it's just like a warehouse for my son, my younger son, who's in college with all his stuff. And that's where we've exceeded the 40%. And that's where we stand.
All right, thank you. And any questions for Mr. Pinault? I guess I just really have an observation, as I look up and down your street, when I see the application like 132% proposed, I think, wow, that's gonna be a really dense lot. Is it gonna create a problem?
I have a three-quarter.
Well, exactly, when I look at your property, it's actually just the opposite. I think that your property is one of the least dense ones, with a lot of yard space on the street, which is a very unique
Right.
situation.
I'm like the third biggest lot on the street.
Right, and, so I think that needs to be part of the record, because that is, a unique situation with your lot that I think speaks to, even though 132% sounds like a lot, the reality is it's quite an open lot,
Right.
in my opinion.
That's what the lady had told me. It's like, we see that you have plenty of area in your yard, but going by what it is written down in your bylaws there, I think I only have like 1,200 square feet of house, and then the structure, and then the pool, and then the deck that they want to put on, exceeds the 40%, so.
Another way of looking at it is, if your house was bigger, if you expanded the house, that percentage would go down. You might not even have to be here if you had a big house on a big lot, but you have a small house on a big lot.
Right. Eventually, we'd like to put a garage with an upstairs on top of it, which is just to where the van is parked. So, but I just don't, it's a small house, 2-bedroom. The house was built back in the 40s, was renovated in the 80s.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Pinault? I think we're all set. You could have a seat. Anybody else to speak in favor or against of Mr. Pinault's application? With that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts? Mr. Boucher?
I think it's pretty straightforward. Again, we see these on occasion, small house, large lot. I mean, it's just been said. To me, there's nothing here that even concerns me about this application. There was an existing pool, and again, large lot, small house, just the way it is. So we're not gonna force them to put a $300,000 addition on a house so that he can have his pool, right? So to make a bigger house so he can have his pool. So again, I'm in favor of the application as it stands.
Yeah, Ms. Vitale,
Yes, I agree. Very clear cut.
Yeah, I agree, and I hate to tell you, but when you do put the garage, your sons will fill that up too. Mine has. Doesn't matter, so does mine. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Never go away.
No, they don't. So I completely agree, and I like Mr. Boucher's comment, and he didn't want to make him put on a $300,000 addition so we could just add a pool. No, this is a no-brainer.
yep, everything's been stated. Yep, go ahead, right ahead, Mr. Boucher.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance for Raymond and Nancy Pino at 54 Caldwell Road. They are requesting a variance to exceed maximum accessory use area, 40% allowed, 132% proposed to construct a 20-foot round swimming pool with a 16 by 18 deck. The zoning is R9, code section 190-264. Definition is use accessory. The variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. As we spoke, it's a small house on a large lot, thus the inverted percentage, why the percentage is so high. And the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance. We find that it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. It is not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice would be served. So I make a motion to approve the variance.
Seconded by Ms. Vitale. Any discussion on the motion? Show of hands in favor. So that's approved. Again, there's that 30-day window. Doesn't seem anybody's in opposition, but you never know, but we should. Oh, I thought you said 28.
I think it's a 28.
I think you kind of mumbled it quick, but yeah, it was 28.
It's 20, I'm sorry, I was,
The application's all correct, you're all good.
the motion is as read here, so if there's a mistake, we'll correct it,
It's
but,
all good.
yeah, we're all set.
All right, with that, close the public meeting on case number 6. We good to keep going?
Yep.
All right, I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 7. The owner is GSR Ventures LLC. The applicant is Collision Communications. The address is 12 Murphy Drive, Unit 2. The description is requesting a variance to allow a previously permitted wall sign to remain as an off-premises sign due to a change in tenancy in a portion of an existing building. This is in the Park Industrial Zone. Hi, good evening. Could you give us your name and address for the record?
Sure, my name is Carl Marshall. I'm with Marshall Signs, 51 Lowell Street in Nashua.
Hi, would you like to walk us through your request?
Sure. What we're doing is proposing a non-illuminated sign for the tenant in question, which is Collision Communications, and then also maintaining a permitted sign that GM Roth has that kind of directs people around to the front of their office. The area is in the middle of a park industrial zone at the end of basically a cul-de-sac road that abuts directly on the highway. And on either side is all industrial properties. And for the most part, the Collision is looking to get a better visibility during the day. And also to help clarify their entrance versus having Roth's customers coming to their door and going in. Their operation is strictly during the day, and they're just looking for that extra visibility so their clients can find them also. But Roth would like to maintain the sign in order to get their clients around. And that sign is illuminated, so because they have clients also at nighttime. And as you get into the later part of the year, in the Novembers, they need the light to see and direct them around to the side of the building. There's no residences whatsoever in the area, and again, it's right next to the highway, and it's trying to resolve two issues. Number one, to identify Collision's location better, but also to alleviate Roth's need to have that identification. So the hardship is basically so that they can get their clients to come around to the other side of the building. I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. There's pictures of the sign, the proposed sign and the location, I believe, in the handout that was submitted with the application.
Yep, there's pictures here in the application.
The Collision sign, too, is not lighted. That is a non-illuminated sign, just for the record.
Questions for Mr. Marshall? Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Just to clarify, is the entrance to Collision, the entrance to Collision is, can you see that picture?
It's directly under the sign, correct. That portion of that building, that's kind of the odd part of that whole complex. It's a huge building, multiple tenant building. And there's like an L, and the Roth people actually had that at one point as a design center. And as the economy changed, they moved back into the main building. So it's like a funny L shape on the end of the building. And that is the entrance for that part of the building. The access before was through the main entrance, which there's still a door that they can come in and go in should they want to take that space back at some point.
Well, I guess my humble observation is that, I want to see Collision, whatever it is, succeed. We need new businesses in the town. But the Collision sign under the GM Roth sign.
That's actually an awning that was put up.
Awning, yeah. But I mean, what the proposal is a sign
Correct.
above the awning, like right under the GM Roth sign.
Correct.
I actually find that confusing. I mean, I know what the application is because I have it in front of me, and then I go look at it. But I'm saying to myself, if I was going looking for either Collision or GM Roth, I'd go right in that Collision door. And I mean, Roth has a sign, on the street, when I say the street, Northeastern Boulevard.
Correct.
So you turn down, and I just think it's pretty straightforward to get to Roth by going around the front. I mean, when you drive around you want to call that the front, what's facing the highway.
Correct.
I think those businesses are well identified with the signs above them, like you know where you're going, Roth included. But leaving the Roth sign there, to me, makes it confusion. That's just my thought, because why not just have the collision sign, because that's what it is, that's what that doorway is.
The only other part of the equation here would be the part of that GM Roth sign that we're going to eliminate the, I think it says, let me get- yeah, the design build portion is going to be changed with a more visible directional arrow to bring them around.
Oh, so the proposal is to change the Roth sign?
It's just to change the lettering on the face, it's half of the face itself also. We're not changing the size of it, we're not modifying it, we're just changing the lettering, again, to clarify the confusion.
Is there gonna be an arrow on it to go, the
There's
GM?
most likely be some sort of an arrow, yes.
I see,
That's a face change, they could do that by right.
okay,
You don't need to come here for that, really, it's a face change.
all right. All right, well, thank you for answering my question.
Yes.
Any other questions, thoughts? No? All right. You have the right to speak in favor, so please come to the mic and give us your name and address.
My name is Tony Martinez, and I'm representing GSR Ventures, or GM Roth. So it's at 12 Murphy Drive. That's where
Thank
the
you.
business is located. What you have to understand is that even though these people are tenants, that someday they may not be tenants. So the idea to have both signs makes sense, because someday, a year, 2 years, 3 years, collision insurance may decide, well, or collision communications may decide, well, I don't have enough space in this portion of the building, I need to move out. At that point, it makes good sense to continue to have our sign there, because we still own the whole building. So, the tenant wanted to have some more visibility. I understood that, because what was happening is people were inadvertently our people would go to his door, or his people would go to our door. So that would be eliminated now by having this more clear cut. So that's what we're intending to do there.
So would you be putting an arrow on the GM Roth sign?
Absolutely, yeah, yes.
All right,
Stipulation.
that's a thought, yeah. We'll see. Any questions? I think we're all set, so you
Thank
can
you
have a
very
seat, Mr. Martinez. I'll close the public, just for the record, there's nobody in opposition here. So I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts? Mr. Boucher, you're looking like you're ready to go.
Yeah, sure. So Mr. Marshall's description and Mr. Martinez made it very clear that, and that was my concern, two signs, a little confusing, but I could see where, they put those arrows that look like you go around the building. And so, again, we're talking about a building that's off the road, it's totally industrial. We're looking at a sign over the door. I say, hey, if it works for them, because the sign is not something that's being illuminated, it's not this big monstrous thing. I think if it works for their business, that's, what works for them. I don't really see, even though we may look at that, like you said, like we understand application, but if they feel that they can direct their customers, the customers to each location, and they can get that down pat, then, then if it works for them, I'm not in any opposition to putting that non-illuminated sign over that particular door. And again, based upon the location, the distance off the road, what it really is, and knowing that, there's only one lighted sign there. If it was two lighted signs, that'd be kind of different for me, but it's one lighted sign, so. And again, as you described, it's just a half face change on that, and slide one in, slide one out, and you're done. So I'll be in support of the application.
Ms. Vitale?
I'm in support of it also, and is part of it, we doing the stipulation about the arrow around the building, or is it we just gonna let them take care of that?
up for discussion.
My opinion is it's their business, right? So let them deal with it, you know, we're not, I don't think we should ever be in the middle of tenant-landlord relationships. The only thing that we care about is that the landlord that owns the building is giving the tenant, right, sign off that they're allowing them to come in and apply for, right, for an extra sign, right?
The
That's
only
it.
thing we would be concerned about is just maybe, you know, public safety.
Right,
Say
right.
someone's in the building at 1 o'clock in the morning, it's dark out, and a EMS driver, a police officer, fireman's trying to get to somewhere in GM Roth or Collision, and we don't want any confusion at 2 o'clock in the morning when it's dark and raining out to what door to go to, so an arrow, I think, is a simple fix, and it's a simple, inexpensive face change. If they can take it out if Collision ever moves out.
So,
I just think just from a safety perspective, it may not be a bad idea, but
so stipulate, I'll be fine if you stipulate a directional arrow, some type of directional arrow on the sign, that's fine. That'd be fine. That makes it clear.
Okay.
I'm in support. I was confused at first as to why you would have GM Roth and then have Collision Communications. It was confusing until he explained that, Mr. Martinez explained that people come and go, and GM Roth is gonna stay because they own the building. But, like Mr. Falk said, a face change doesn't require any input from us at all. So them putting an arrow is a face change, as you said. And I don't know that we even have the right to make that stipulation, because while it's a safety issue, I think that it's a face change, and that doesn't come under our purview. But I support the collision sign.
I mean, we don't even require a sign permit for a face change. The only time we do that is if it's in the historic district.
Right.
I guess my thought is, I think it is confusing if there wasn't an arrow on it, and I'm trying to think, while I agree, you know, lets the applicant do what they want with their property, I'm trying to see, is there some sort of marriage here where we can facilitate both signs but avoid confusion in a motion that's along the lines of, you know, if you know, because if GM Roth owns the building, so with this collision sign, it becomes an off-premises sign. So what we're saying is, if it's an off-premises sign, we're asking it to have a directional arrow on it. And suppose Collision goes away and GM Roth reoccupies the building, then it's not an off-premises sign, and they wouldn't want to have an arrow there anyway.
How does it become off-premises if GM Roth owns the building?
Well, because it's, go ahead.
Collision
I'll
is
let-
the other sign, and that is not the one with the arrow. GM Roth wants the one with the arrow, and that's the face change, correct? Or am I misunderstanding?
Well, okay, I can show you better from the drawing, probably. I think we all got this drawing that shows GM Roth, their location, and where Collision is. Collision has this piece back here.
Yep.
GM Roth has this piece over here. GM Roth has a sign that got legally permitted over here. They're no longer using this part of the building at all. Doesn't matter if they own it or not. Their sign is there, but there's gonna be another tenant there, another occupant. So it's considered an off-premise sign. Signs have to be within your premise. They have to be within that space. So by this sign not being there anymore, even though it was permitted, it just becomes a non-conforming sign. Collision, they can put their sign up there by right, because they have the right to, but we said, no, you're creating a non-conforming situation by keeping the GM Roth sign there. If GM Roth, at the outset, moved their sign over here, they wouldn't have ever even been here tonight. So, it's the same thing with, you know, on Amherst Street, where Big Lots and, I can't think of the other stores, there used to be Tuesday Morning in there. right by Pier 1.
Yeah, I know
The
what
big lots, right on the corner, closest to Amherst Street, that big space of that big, huge brick wall. Well, everybody wanted their signs on that front wall, so as you're driving down Amherst Street, everybody gets to see those signs. But they're all off premise, because that wasn't where their space was. Their space was down the building way. So that's kind of what this is in a smaller scale. So,
Anyway, I'd be, oh,
really
you
can't
know,
explain it any other way.
Thank
So-
you. No, that clears it up. I understand.
I'd be apt to, I'd lean towards having a stipulation for an arrow for the off-premises sign. It doesn't lock them into it if Dave moves back in. That's just my opinion.
No, I agree with that now that it was explained to me. Now I understand.
Can I make a motion?
So,
Oh.
again, just so we don't lock the applicant or something, I know that they said arrow, and there's other ways of doing it, it's by saying around rear or whatever, but I think they said arrow. Do we want to make sure that that's what it is? Or that's what we want and that's it?
I don't mind if we want to ask a clarifying question of,
If the arrow's gonna be fine,
Arrow.
before we stipulate it and lock them in case they want to do something different.
Arrow around back or something.
Yeah.
Around the corner with an arrow curved or something.
So do we want to put in something that maybe is a little, not so general, but more of it's a form of direction on the GM Roth sign?
Addition of a directional
yeah,
sign.
Let them figure out.
Yeah, let them figure out what to do.
add and
Directional signage.
direction, that's fine, directional notification on the
Okay,
sign.
okay.
Yeah, so directional notification.
Want to
Okay.
make the motion?
If you'd like to, go ahead, or do
Oh,
you want me
no,
to?
yeah, that'd
Okay,
be
I'll
great.
make a motion on behalf of GSR Ventures LLC. The applicant again is Collision Communications at 12 Mercy Drive, Unit 2. The request is a variance to allow a previously permitted wall sign to remain as an off-premises sign due to a change in tenancy in a portion of an existing building, and this is in the Park Industrial Zone. I make a motion to approve this variance, but with a stipulation that directional element will be added to the GM Ross sign. And I think the board finds that with this directional element, the variance is needed to enable the applicant to propose use of the property, which is to lease out a portion of the building which they don't own. I think it's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance to allow this off-premises sign to remain with a directional element to it. I think the board finds it will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. It's not contrary, but it's within the public interest to add this directionality to the GM Ross sign, and that substantial justice is served. So I make a motion to approve with the stipulation to add a directional element, seconded by Mr. Boucher. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor. So that's unanimous, so good luck with your sign and your business. With that, I'll close a public meeting on case number 7. A little more business at hand. We have minutes.
May 23rd.
And myself, Mr. Boucher, and Ms. McKay were here. Any amendments to the minutes? So I'll make a motion to approve the May 23rd minutes as presented, seconded by Mr. Boucher. And voting on this will be Boucher, Courier, and McKay. We have a motion to approve without any additions. Show of hands in favor, so that's unanimous. And we have,
Was that 4?
there was 3.
3.
It was the 3 of us voting, because the three of us
Okay.
were here. And we have agenda for our next meeting, June 17th. There's one application, 5 to 7 Everett Street and 4 to 6 Stevens Street. Does anybody find any regional impact? So
That's right
Ms.
by
Vi-
Gate City fence.
Ms. Vitale, Boucher, and Mary Ellen McKay and myself all indicate no regional impact. Is there any other business before the board tonight? No? If not, I make a motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Boucher. All in favor?